Too Much Information is a production of iHeart. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Too Much Information, the show that brings you the little-known facts and figures behind your favorite movies, music, TV shows, and more. We are your professors of pop culture, your little buddies of ludicrously detailed deep dives, your skippers of scholarly sitcom takes, about to embark on a 3-hour tour of trivia. My name is Jordan Runtagh.
And I'm Alex Heigl. I knew you were going to be excited about this one, you weirdo.
Damn it, I am.
What are we doing, buddy?
Today we are looking at one of the lodestars of mid-century entertainment, a show that has got to be, really when you think about it, one of the most instantly recognizable pieces of media we have ever examined on this show. Familiar to everyone from boomers to millennials who came of age with Nick at Night and TV Land and endless TBS marathons.
And then it stopped there.
Yeah, I don't really know if this crossed the chasm to Zoomers.
Yeah, do Zoomers know anything about this?
I will find out. Actually, no, we won't.
No,
they don't
we
listen.
never hear from them.
I'm talking, of course, about Gilligan's Island.
A 3-hour tour. I was just going to uncork that right out of the gate.
A 3-hour episode, my friends.
No, folks, it won't be. I promise. Unless it will.
You got a plane to catch.
Unless it will, though.
It's a show that's endlessly silly, but undeniably charming in its own gloriously kitschy way. It's fascinating to me because it heralded the start of the high concept era of sitcoms. You know, I mean, throughout the 50s, the airwaves have been filled with family stories set in the suburbs or the Old West, it must be said. But by the mid-60s, these types of shows had grown stale, and TV execs had moved on to things that were, frankly, a little weirder. You had your fish-out-of-water stories like the Beverly Hillbillies, slightly more subversive and surreal takes on sitcom life like Bewitched and The Munsters and The Addams Family, and then, of course, something like Gilligan's Island, which is oh so many things. It's a farcical social commentary about 7 vastly different people starting civilization anew. It's a fascinating look at lost souls who bring the trappings of the modern world to a tropical paradise. And it's also a Sisyphean horror story about as troubling as Groundhog Day, where attempts at salvation are thwarted by an idiot in a bucket hat over and over and over again. Heigl, what do you think about Gilligan's Island?
You know what? Maybe the younger generations will glom onto it now that bucket hats have unironically come back around. I am counting the days for I don't know, The Cut. Like, who would publish the thing that was like, or like Complex, that would be like
bucket hats are back?
No, I mean, they've already run that, but I mean, Gilligan fit check. Did you know that Gilligan low-key had fire outfits?
Low-key swag.
Yeah, low-key swag.
It's such an aesthetically disgusting time.
Sure is. What are my thoughts on Gilligan's Island? Null.
I mean, that makes sense. And you know what? I don't even get offended by that because it's just one of those things that's always been there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of exactly the hierarchy of shows that I was involved in that you mentioned succinctly as the aforementioned, like, millennial grows up with, Nick at Night programming. And, it was definitely, were Addams Family and Munsters part of Nick at Night?
I don't think they were. I think I would see them at my grandparents' because they had TV Land. Yeah.
So of the Nick at Night stuff, I was more of a MASH. And I also liked All in the Family a good bit. But yeah, man, some of this just misses me. I'm also like an edge case on Happy Days. I know that might strike you as blasphemous, but
I'm surprised you're even an edge case. I know how much you hate the 50s. I'm shocked to hear that you would even tolerate that.
Yeah.
Was it the Fonz? Did you like the Fonz? Did you think the Fonz was cool? Yeah.
I did, but tepidly so.
When he banged the jukebox and made it play for free?
That was cool.
Was it when he had the bathroom stall as his office?
That was also cool.
Yeah.
Didn't they steal that in Fast Times at Ridgemont High? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, and my distaste of that time period bleeds into, as you well know, like the early 60s. Basically anything pre, Summer of Love. And I hate deifying that era because dun 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 dun, or oh, some folks born. That stuff's all been pumped into our veins, but that is to me when there's just such a much needed shot of interest and danger into like American mainstream culture. Maybe it's just because I'm reading Chaos right now, a book about. You know what's really tinfoily is doing what I'm doing, which is reading Chaos and cross-referencing it with McGowan's Program to Kill.
Tell the folks what Chaos is about.
Yeah, so dedicated longtime TMI fans know of Jordan and I's shared fascination with Laurel Canyon and the fringe theory of Laurel Canyon in the 60s as an extended CIA psyop. And what my current work presupposes is that it was that. No, but I'm cross-referencing it too with two very bizarre books. One of his much more celebrated than the other. One is Chaos, which is about Charles Manson and the CIA in the 60s in LA and elsewhere. And that is that this guy worked on, Tom O'Neill worked on for like 20 years.
Almost drove him insane. Like it bankrupted him. Like, he's
a hero. And then the other one is Program to Kill, which is by the guy who wrote the definitive text on the Laurel Canyon era. Is that called Weird Echoes in the Canyon?
Weird Scenes in the Canyon, I think it's called.
Weird Scenes in the Canyon. Yeah. And it's a much less whimsical book. Program to Kill is about the really tinfoily theory that much of the CIA's activities in the middle of the 20th century and sort of what we have deemed like the peak serial killer era are all tied back to the CIA's mid 20th century attempts at like mind control, whether it was through MK Ultra or just like finding exquisitely damaged humans in the course of their day to day and then damaging them further to try and create like weapons that, would then go rogue and stuff up. So that has nothing to do with Gilligan's Island, but that is what I'm. Or does it? Yeah. But that's what I'm reading right now. And how did we get onto that, Jordan? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this Gilligan's Island stuff, when we did the Munsters, we talked a little bit about how the reflection of the atomic family of this era came so much out of, the Eisenhower era and sort of GIs coming back and establishing the white picket fence and the home in the burbs, like, quote unquote American dream. But that was started to get subverted by, as you said, like, I would argue the seeds of the early exploitation movement. Less with like hillbilly. Like, have you heard of hicksploitation as a genre?
I've never heard it referred to as such. You mean like Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, Green Acres?
No, not the whimsical stuff. I'm talking about bringing it into the horror realm. Yeah,
no.
Hicksploitation would be like Hills Have Eyes. Anything where like a murderous redneck is the kind of thing. And then you kind of trace a line, I think, from that to like the Munsters and kind of spooky stuff and sci-fi. All of that can kind of, I don't know, a better man than I would trace that sort of directly to this era than sitcoms rather than just wildly conjecturing on a podcast. But here we are. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, like you said, it's a pivotal time in American television. And that's what's interesting to me about it. But other than the theme song, and I'm going to be honest with you, I also forgot some of the characters. Like,
there's only 7 of them. Oh, come on. These archetypes are indelible.
I forgot the rich people.
You would.
Yeah, exactly. They would be first against the wall in my island utopia.
It's rich people stranded on an island. You would love that.
Yeah, well, that's what Triangle of Sadness was about. But yeah, I forgot about them for sure. I knew that there were the 2 babes and the blundering idiot and the captain.
The skipper.
Yeah, and then that was it. And the rest.
And it's in the theme. It's in the theme song, minus the rest.
Right. The professor. Yes. I also knew about him. Maybe. Anyway, this would bode well for our, Apple Podcast reviews where they're like, Heigl lazily proclaims his ignorance of the topic at hand. So now I'm not even doing it lazily. I'm doing it full-throatedly. I don't know anything about Gilligan's Island.
Oh, come on. But you will. Once we start talking about this, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, because everyone does. That's what's so interesting about it. You just absorb it. Like, I never sat down to try to learn about this until like 3 days ago, in which case I went insane. Yeah. But before that, it's just one of those things and everyone knows it. That's what's so interesting to me. I'm so fascinated by things that nobody sets out to learn, but everybody knows about. And we've talked about that. I don't know if that stuff exists for Zoomers anymore because we would just watch things because it was on. Now it's on demand. Nobody demands this.
Yeah. The monoculture is dead, right? And like even pre-streaming or like pre-social media web 3.0, 2.0, whichever fucking one we're on, pre like social media ubiquity and smartphones, like that was already disappearing just because the internet balkanized everything and you were able to find stuff and you didn't bond over just like, I watched this a lot when I was stoned on my couch or whatever. Like I watched this a lot because it was on in between soccer practice and homework or, any of that stuff. That doesn't exist anymore for better or for worse. And, we're all here to mourn it.
I'm celebrating it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. That's fine too. Whatever makes the donuts, baby.
Well, from the surprisingly highbrow origins of this decidedly lowbrow classic to the hilariously petty meaning behind the SS Minnow's name, the hilarious feud between Ginger and the rest of the castaways and the rest, and the heartwarming tale of the skipper's final days. Here's everything you didn't know about Gilligan's Island.
Let's light this candle.
Gilligan's Island was the brainchild of Sherwood Schwartz, the awesomely named Sherwood Schwartz, a TV icon who also created the Brady Bunch at the end of the 60s. Loyal TMI listeners will recall that he was inspired to create the Brady Bunch after reading an article about the rising divorce rate in the United States, and, amazingly, Gilligan's Island came from similarly academic beginnings. Schwartz was attending a public speaking class at New York University when the professor asked the students to write a 1-minute speech on the following topic. If you were stranded on a desert island, what's one item that you'd like to have?
This is such a litany of like completely bygone relics. A public speaking class?
Yeah.
Like a writing assignment?
Schwartz found himself intrigued by this question and filed it away in the back of his mind for many, many years. After spending much of the 50s as a writer on shows like The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet.
Wait, shut up for a second. What would you bring?
Oh, man. I've thought a lot about this because there's a great British radio show that's been on since the late 40s called Desert Island Discs, which is awesome. And it's all about the 8 songs, 1 book, and 1 luxury that the guest would bring. And they've had everybody from Carl Sagan to Bruce Springsteen to Princess Margaret to Alfred Hitchcock on over the course of the last 70 years.
Bruce Springsteen probably had something dumb like Oompa Papa Rockaroo, like from like 1953 that he's like been obsessed with for 400 years. There was a McSweeney's article that was like Keith Richards stranded on an actual desert island with his discs. And it was just talking about him like trying to attract seagulls with like the Chuck Berry collection or like eating Robert Johnson's the King of the Delta Blues CD. That's what I remember from this. Yeah.
What would I bring? What would I bring?
Yeah.
Now this is when it gets weird. Is it something of practical value or is it just a luxury?
That's I guess the question. Like, are we discounting like knife, axe, gun, net?
I'm going to say because that's just that. Then it gets into a purely academic thing as opposed to something of that. What I bring, either an extremely long book that I've never read, like something like the complete works of Shakespeare or something that I just have never gotten around to reading and figured that there'd be enough there to like keep me interested.
Sure,
or maybe a piano because it's something I can kind of play but not well.
Yeah. If you bring like I mean mine would probably be an instrument of some kind. There's a famous Reddit bit that this like guy, they're like what would you do again? What would you do in the world if you could have anything in life? And this one of the comments is this like beautifully emotional thing about this guy being like, I would just want to make love to my wife one more time. She died, this, that, and the other, and like blah, blah, blah. And then the comment underneath it is, I also choose to this guy's wife. so mine would be like, Desert Island, Monica Bellucci in the year 2000. Elizabeth Hurley, but only from the first Austin Powers. Like those are my picks. Yeah, I don't know, like a huge tome, something that I could go insane with. So maybe like the Bible.
Many before you have gone insane with the Bible, Heigl.
Better men than I.
I remember this all reminds me of a big group of friends. We're having dinner for some friend's birthday, and one of our friends was wearing this ring, this very distinctive looking, fascinating ring. And we asked him about it because it was like very, very striking.
He was a Mason.
I mean, it kind of seemed like that. It seemed like some kind of, imbued with some kind of significance. And he said it was this like ring made of petrified wood that his grandfather had given to him, and it had been given to his grandfather by like some army buddy whose life he'd saved. He had this long, involved story. And then everybody gets quiet after just taking it all in. And then somebody just goes, can I have it? It was great.
Yeah, I don't know. That runs my category on. I guess it's excluding like slavery, right? Like you can't bring like humans.
No,
a human.
I think that's frowned upon in these hypothetical exercises. Yeah.
All right. Well, then I have no interest in it. Moving on. Where were you?
Sherwood Schwartz. Going back to Sherwood Schwartz. Yes, the creator of Gilligan's Island. After spending much of the 50s as a writer on shows like The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, which is also known as the proto-reality show. Look it up, folks. We're already 20 minutes in, and we're on page 1 of 18 in Heigl's Flight to Catch. He was also the writer on The Red Skelton Show and several other sitcoms. Sherwood Schwartz entered the decade of the 60s ready to pitch a show of his own. And he thought back to this old college writing prompt, which he thought was rich with possibilities. Specifically, he was intrigued by the dynamic between a group of strangers from varied backgrounds learning to work together and live alongside one another while stranded on this island. He approached the writing of this show as a sociological experiment, seriously. And that is part of the reason why characters like the professor and the skipper are known by their titles and not their actual names.
Interesting.
As Schwartz would kind of over-explain in the book Inside Gilligan's Island, From Creation to Syndication, the island would be, quote, a social microcosm and a metaphorical shaming of world politics in the sense that when necessary for survival, yes, we can all get along. That is a quote from the creator of Gilligan's Island about Gilligan's Island.
It's going to get deep on this episode.
Words like microcosm went over the heads of CBS network brass who were looking for something simultaneously dumber and smarter for a new show.
Maybe a car and it's your mother?
It's very Freudian. We'll get to that. The executives at CBS felt that the premise of Gilligan's Island was too unrealistic and boring. Somehow, Sherwood Schwartz convinced them to make a pilot in the fall of 1963 to be shot on location in the new state of Hawaii. It had only been a state for 4 years at that point, barely 4 years.
That's crazy. I feel like people don't know that.
I know. It's so weird.
And by people, I mean maybe me at this exact moment. Like, no wonder we lost our shit for Hawaiian kitsch crap in the 70s. We had a brand new state to be excited about.
I can't imagine. Can you imagine having not only a brand new state, but a brand new state that's not like Connecticut? Like a brand new state that's like...
We got a good one this time.
Yeah. We took one with stuff that we don't already have. But before... Yeah.
American history is soaked in blood.
I bring the kitsch, you bring the shame. You say tomato, I say tomato.
Let's make a beautiful salad.
But before filming could begin, obviously they needed a cast. It all hinged on the bumbling first mate we all know and love, sort of, as Gilligan. The distinctive moniker was chosen by Sherwood Schwartz at random from a Los Angeles telephone directory. Over the course of the series, he's only ever referred to as Gilligan, but Schwartz's original notes indicate that his full name is Willie Gilligan. Yet Bob Denver, who played the character, always insisted that Gilligan was the character's first name, and the last name remained unknown. This became a mild point of contention with Schwartz, who later said, almost every time I see Bob Denver, we still argue. He thinks Gilligan is his first name, and I think it's his last name. Because in its original presentation, it's Willie Gilligan. But he doesn't believe it, and he doesn't want to discuss it. He insists the name is Gilligan. But before Bob Denver entered the picture, there was very nearly a different Gilligan. Schwartz initially had his eye on Jerry Van Dyke, brother of sitcom star du jour Dick Van Dyke, who would later star in the sitcom Coach.
Oh, with, what's his name? Craig
T. Nelson, yeah. Jerry Van Dyke was Schwartz's first choice to play Gilligan, explaining in his memoir, "You not only expect to see Jerry Van Dyke in a sweatshirt, you expect to see a hole in it." Ouch. Maybe he's still mad that Jerry Van Dyke turned it down, I guess. He turned down the role because he wanted to follow in the footsteps of his brother Dick and star in a series of his own instead of an ensemble cast. Dick Van Dyke was, at this time, starring in The Dick Van Dyke Show. Just want to close the loop on that.
God, that's gotta suck if your brother is Dick Van Dyke and you go into show business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, was there a Steve Carson who was also in Late Night?
I mean, Paul McCartney's got a brother, Michael McCartney, and he made music.
Oof.
You either lean into it or you get as far away from it as possible.
Yeah.
Jerry Van Dyke was not impressed with the Gilligan's Island pilot script, calling it the worst thing I'd ever read. Instead, until he accepted the lead in a short-lived sitcom called My Mother the Car, which is on the short list of shows widely considered to be the worst of all time.
And yet has repeatedly come up in TMI lore. Like,
because it's so
this
bad.
Is our second or third mention of My Mother the Car.
It's such an insane premise. We touched on it earlier. It's about a man whose late mother inhabits a car.
It tells you everything.
It's right there in the title, I guess. Yeah.
That's what it says on the tin.
I've never actually seen it. Have you?
No.
No, yeah, okay.
Maybe one day. At this point, why not?
So, I mean, I think we can all agree that Gilligan's Island is not exactly, it's not Chaucer. It's not Dickens here. But Jerry Van Dyke somehow managed to find something even worse.
Yeah, right. Good for him.
Yeah. He would later say, "I had a lot of problems with the agency I was at because they were trying to push me into taking Gilligan's Island. But that's the joke. I turned it down and took My Mother the Car. But again, it was really good because I'd have forever been known as Gilligan. So that worked out too." Do you want to be known as Gilligan or do you want to not be known at all as Dick Van Dyke's brother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Well, at least he's like self-aware about it.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if he was like Bill Shatner and like just continually insisting on his own worth and like, legacy. And at least he's like, yeah, I was in My Mother the Car.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'd do anything for you? No?
Ultimately, the role of Gilligan went to actor Bob Denver, who is not related to singer-songwriter John Denver, whose real name is Henry John Dusseldorf Jr.
Common misconception.
Yes. But this is wild. Bob Denver, the guy who played Gilligan, is in fact the great-great-grandson of James William Denver, for whom Denver, Colorado is named.
Far out.
Denver, Colorado. That do anything for you?
So they definitely killed a lot of Indians. If you're named after Colorado.
Or at least Buffalo.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Man. Well, all right. Blood, America's soaked in the blood of not white people.
And you could even argue that Gilligan's colonizing another place, hence Gilligan's Island.
Hell yeah. Let's go there.
Yeah. Despite playing two of the most notorious screw-ups in television history, Bob Denver is kind of a serious dude. No less of an authority than the professor himself, Russell Johnson, who we'll talk about later, the guy who played the professor, admitted to MeTV, Bobby Denver was the opposite of the character he played. He was a school teacher. He's very straight and organized, not this bumbling guy. Bob wasn't like that at all. Bob Denver was pre-law before shifting to acting. Gilligan was pre-law. To make ends meet, presumably while he was pre-law, he served as the athletic director at a school in Pacific Palisades, coaching football, basketball, and baseball, while teaching history to 7th graders and math to 4th graders, plus a night gig at a post office. This is a whole-brained man. That couldn't have been while he was in pre-law. Having a day gig and a night gig and being pre-law, that's too many things.
Pre-law is just a bachelor's degree, right?
Yeah, but
yeah.
I mean,
so, and this was what, the 40s?
50s.
Yeah, so they just kind of waved you through, right? It cost like $2 back then. Come on. Working at the post office was probably harder.
Yeah. When he was 24 in 1959, Bob Denver landed his third ever acting gig as beatnik hero Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
Many loves, not many lives. Yeah, it would have been better if it was many lives and it was like a quantum leap kind of thing.
Oh, or like the reincarnation of Peter Pride?
How do you come up with a more obscure TV reference?
Oh, no, that was a movie.
Oh, okay.
You would like it, though.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay. I love The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. It had Tuesday Weld on it. Big crush on Tuesday Weld.
Yeah, of course you did.
The Maynard G. Krebs character is the character that Shaggy from Scooby-Doo is based on. Like, he's the stereotypical beatnik with the goatee and the ragged T-shirt and the bongos. Yeah, big bongos.
That's like the cultural perception of beatnik before
It's him,
beatnik was...
yeah.
Right. Like, and how long was that actually a thing, though, before... Because here's my question about that. And, you know, forgive me for digressing, but
No.
beat culture was like what, the early 50s until they turned into hippies, right?
I mean, beat culture, I mean, it's like the hippie thing. I mean, the hippies were a thing underground for, you know, I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg is when it was actually in media, but it was probably underground before, much longer. So I would say beat culture could have been, I mean, I'm not as steeped in that as I am the hippie stuff, but I would say probably 52, 53, 54. And then it started going mainstream in the late 50s. And then hippies were a thing, I'd say, you know, early in the decade, probably even before Kennedy was, you know, I mean, you had student activists in your adopted hometown of Berkeley. Mario Savio, the throw your bodies on the wheels of production, that famous speech. I think that was 1960. So, I mean, there was some crossover between the beats and the hippies, but hippies, I think, were more activists.
This gets back to the PSYOP thing, which is
now
we're just completely digressing. But like, you know, there are people who theorize that the hippie movement was, again, this psyop to defang the very legitimate student protesting, anti-war movements, and the labor movement. People talk about like the glory days of the unions, but like that was a very specific moment in time that was ended pretty quickly.
By transforming them into LSD-soaked flower children who, you know...
Tune in, turn out, drop on, whatever that was. It was not exactly a cohesive message to, you know, proactive labor organizing or you know, war movement opposition. Anyway, that's all fascinating. I don't know beatniks, man. I knew
that's funny. I assumed you would with jazz and poetry, and
I kind of just stopped with On the Road. Yeah, I like Ferlinghetti. I like some of the poets that came out of City Lights, but yeah, I didn't.
You're in San Francisco. Did you ever go to City Lights? Very famous bookstore.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we talked about the you know, we talked about in the Big Trouble in Little China episode, Victor Wong, who's like character actor that my generation grew up with as like a mentor wizard figure and was like actually like first generation City Lights beatnik guys, which I will never get over. What were we talking about, Jordan?
We somehow managed to organically link all of the hippie PSYOP stuff. No, all the hippie PSYOP stuff with Gilligan's Island through Bob Denver playing this beatnik. I'm really happy about that. I feel really good about this.
Yeah, me too. All right.
So Bob Denver played this beatnik character, Maynard G. Krebs, on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis from 1959 until the show ended in 1963, the same year casting began for Gilligan's Island. So that's Gilligan. Now we got to have the skipper.
Set. Yes. Transition. The skipper, or as he was known on his birth certificate, Jonas Grumby, which is mentioned in the pilot episode and then on one other occasion throughout the run of the series. Jordan, have we verified that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. As one might expect, the skipper is an ex-Navy man. There are several episodes where he indicated that he fought in the Pacific Theater, including the famous Battle of Guadalcanal, which he relives during a PTSD-related stress dream in one scene of the series. Had to have been played for laughs, right?
Yeah,
we were not into confronting that notion of trauma.
No, this wasn't MASH. No, this was not the end of MASH when he realizes it wasn't a chicken crying.
Yeah. God, that's a grim episode.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that one again.
Oh.
Probably shouldn't have. Anyway, the comedic Navy
It
veteran.
was a baby. Why'd you make me remember that? Because now you can heal.
So, according to his backstory, the skipper met Gilligan during his Navy days in WWII, the big one, while serving on a destroyer together. The be-bucket-hatted Gilligan actually saved the skipper's life when a depth charge got loose and rolled down the deck. It would have crushed the skipper had Gilligan not pushed him out of the way. Hence, the skipper's lifelong, weird, indentured servant, Man Friday, advisor, life partnership with Gilligan, despite his clear incompetence. The skipper's military career is elaborated on in the 2003 postmodern novel Gilligan's Wake.
It's a Finnegan's Wake joke.
Thank you, Jordan. That was the joke. Not officially canon, but still a fascinating document written by Tom Carson. He posits that the skipper served on a PT boat with both John F. Kennedy and Quentin McHale of McHale's Navy, which is also a show?
Oh, yeah, you know McHale's Navy. Come on.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In case anyone thought that millennials on Tumblr invented weird fan fiction, no, they did not. You postulate this is famously PT-109, which was historically known to be struck by a Japanese destroyer in August of 1943, splitting the boat in two, causing it to explode and ultimately sink.
This is John F. Kennedy's origin story, by the way.
Yeah. Kennedy and his crew were thrown into the ocean where they clung to the flaming hull for some 12 hours before swimming to a nearby island. Kennedy took the life jacket of a wounded crew member in his mouth and swam for 4 hours through crocodile and shark-infested waters to the relative safety of Plum Pudding Island, a whimsically named 100-yard patch of land with no food or water. Over the course of the next few days, he would make more lengthy swims, towing his injured crewmen with his teeth. They arrived on an island with coconuts for sustenance. Kennedy would carve a message on a coconut shell, which he delivered to nearby natives, leading to their rescue some 6 days after the event, during which time they were also seeking to avoid discovery by the Japanese. The only bummer in this whole story, as it relates to Gilligan's Island, is you'd think the skipper would have mentioned the other time that he had been stranded on an island in the South Pacific with someone who is in this timeline a well-known senator, right?
President, yeah.
Is Gilligan's Island current days?
I would assume, yeah.
Okay, it's not a period piece.
No.
So like an earlier, okay. Interesting.
Isn't that nuts about Kennedy's, like the PT-109 thing? Yeah.
That is crazy. Like a lot of people of my age, I don't care about John F. Kennedy.
You like to dunk on JFK.
Yeah. It's fun and easy. He was a weird guy. Also, I'm still not over his little brother coming after the mafia. Everyone knows your family was made by them, and then you're going to turn on them.
Doth protest too much? Is that kind of the feeling?
Yeah, he got what he deserved.
Speaking of 60s psyops.
Oh yeah, wasn't Saran that's like they think he was like a CIA asset?
Yeah, they think that he was like MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, dude, the more I read about the CIA, even the stuff that's not redacted, the more I don't put anything past them. Just saying that aloud puts me on a list of some kind, right? Anyway, Sherwood Schwartz initially considered casting future All in the Family star Carol O'Connor as the avuncular skipper, but ultimately thought better of it. Do you know what avuncular actually means?
Uncular? Like an uncle?
Yes. Isn't that so funny?
Yeah.
I learned that within the past couple of years. Uncle-like good cheer.
As if that's like a common description.
Yeah. Oh, my uncles are racist. I don't like spending time with them. But I would use avuncular as an insult. You avuncular shithead.
Would you like me to cut that out?
No, I don't care if they know it. Anyway, according to Sherwood Schwartz's son Lloyd, he was really struggling to find the right actor to play the character. Inspiration struck one night at dinner when he heard a jovial laugh at a nearby table. As Lloyd Schwartz relates, the skipper was probably the most difficult role to cast. Dad was upset because it was getting down to the wire. He was at a restaurant with my mother, and at another table was Alan Hale Jr., who my dad didn't know. But he said, "That's the guy," based on his laugh. He didn't approach him or anything, but the next day he told the casting director to pursue him. Unfortunately, Hale left the next day to film a movie called Bullet for a Bad Man in St. George, Utah, when he got the casting call for Gilligan and was unable to get time off for a screen test. So he had to sneak off set after a day of filming, which was about as easy as actually getting off the titular island. In Surviving Gilligan's Island, the incredibly true story of the longest 3-hour tour in history, it is revealed that Hale made his way to Los Angeles from Utah to read a scene with Bob Denver via horseback, hitchhiking, airplane, and taxi. He then reversed the process after his audition and made it back to Utah just in time to resume filming his Western the next day. He would later appear opposite Clint Eastwood in 1968's Hang 'em High.
Is that crazy?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Hale at the time was sort of a more genial George Kennedy. And he would later say he learned his most valuable acting lessons while working as a vacuum salesman. I'll never get over this 40-year period in American life when you could wind up a senator after like digging ditches and working as a brush salesman and maybe a roustabout, a brief period pimping.
Wasn't Harry Truman like a pianist in a brothel? This is like early job.
I mean, just it's all those like it's also like a lot of Silver Age Hollywood guys where you're like, yeah, he was a prostitute and also a pimp, and he dealt tie sticks to all the freaks. And actually, I was just reading part of William Burroughs' Junkie the other day, and that was like all those junkies he was hanging out with the proto beatnik days. He was like, yeah, these guys, they were GIs, and then they maybe dealt a little penicillin in post-war France, and then they would come back, work for a carnival, and eventually they wound up hooked on heroin. That's when I met them. Truly an amazing time in American history. Anyway, Alan Hale's father was a character actor, so Hale spent many hours on Hollywood studio backlots as a kid watching his father work. He also saw other stars of that era at work, one of whom was Oliver Hardy, famous of the
Laurel and Hardy.
a partner of a guy named Laurel. Stan Laurel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, nailed it. Yeah, that's the next sentence. Great job, Alex. Oliver Hardy was famous for breaking the fourth wall, a look of exasperation aimed directly at the camera whenever his partner Stan Laurel would do or say something particularly dim-witted, a move Hale would borrow on Gilligan's Island, and which has been winnowed down in recent memory to just Jim Face from The Office.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's the only time I think we could ever force a Laurel and Hardy reference onto the career of John Krasinski. Hale also played a guest role in 1962 episode of The Andy Griffith Show, in which he refers to Don Knotts' character Barney Fife as Little Buddy on several occasions.
That'll come back later. He brought that to the role.
I would be so pissed off if someone started calling me that.
No one ever will.
Don't you get any ideas? Also, Alan Hale Jr. is only 42 in the first season of Gilligan's Island, which is astounding. Recently on Twitter, the picture of Roy Kinnear, the actor, not to be confused with current actor Rory Kinnear. Roy Kinnear, Rutger Salt's dad in Willy Wonka, 38.
That's terrible. Oh, I hate that. Yeah. That's horrifying. Wow.
And it really is crazy, man. You got like Brad Pitt is like hotter than ever. Like pushing 60? 60?
He is 60, yeah.
Yeah, and you got these guys who are half dead in their mid-30s.
And he died falling off a horse on the set of Terry Gilliam's ill-fated Man of La Mancha movie that he never finished.
That's how I want to go out.
Falling off a horse?
On a literally quixotic, unfinished movie. Ideally by an acclaimed British director, but it's like Nolan, right? There's like not that many other good British directors. Guy Ritchie's kind of jumped the shark.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. He fell off the horse making The Return of the Musketeers. That was filmed with director Richard Lester, who directed the Beatles' 2 scripted movies, A Hard Day's Night and Help. And Roy Kinnear was starred in Help with the Beatles.
I retract my statement. I would no longer like to go out like that.
Yeah. Sorry. I know. That's why I felt very necessary to get that in there.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next up, we have Thurston Howell III, described in show lore as a cunning, ruthless businessman known as the Wolf of Wall Street. I did not make that up. In the pilot episode, the radio announcer reading the name of the lost castaways refers to Mr. Howell as a billionaire, which would put him on par with Howard Hughes and John D. Rockefeller, the latter of whom became the world's first confirmed U.S. billionaire in 1916.
So yeah, that's like $1 trillion today.
It's a lot of money today, yes. I love this. At one point during the show, when someone asks how he fared during the Great Depression, Thurston Howell III's wife says that he was a billionaire, lost most of his money in the crash, and then, quote, became just a millionaire. How angry are you right now? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd kill that dude. I mean, I guess at a certain point, like you have to acknowledge that he would be your best chance of getting off the island, right? Because like these guys have private security, they have like, people looking for him. But I would say after I knew that he had contacted someone who would get us off the island, then I would kill him. Probably his wife too. Just to feel something. Anything.
Among Howell's assets were a diamond mine, a coconut plantation, a railroad, an oil well, and 40 acres in Colorado, which included all of downtown Denver, the aforementioned Denver.
Friend of the show.
Yeah.
Friend of the pod, Denver. Yeah, all that stuff was super racist, man. Like, you said in the 60s? Like, that's still like Belgian Congo era.
Oh, yes.
That man did not have ethical wealth.
No. This is funny. When he hears that an imposter is going to sell off his companies for cash, he's so enraged that he tries to swim back to the mainland 3 times, intent on killing the man, only to be stopped by Gilligan, the skipper, and his wife. They don't call him the Wolf of Wall Street for nothing. The role of Thurston Howell III was written especially for the late, great Jim Backus, familiar to most of us as the voice of the classic cartoon character Mr. Magoo. Fun fact, I really like this. One of his elementary school teachers was none other than Margaret Hamilton, who would later play the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. That's pretty wild.
That's funny.
Yeah. Sherwood Schwartz had to get special approval from CBS to meet Backus's high salary requirements. And once he signed on, he was a beloved figure on the set, known for his bawdy sense of humor and his eagerness to help his fellow actors tweak a joke, develop an ad-lib, or land a punchline. Despite his cash flush status on the show and his premium day rate as an actor, the real-life Jim Backus was notoriously tight with his wallet. Jim Backus was cheap, Dawn Wells, who played Marianne, later told the New York Times. He would take Natalie Schaefer, his on-screen wife, and I to lunch and say, "Oh, I forgot my wallet." I think after the first year, Natalie presented him with a bill for $300 and told him, "This is what you owe us." That's like $3,000 today.
Good for her.
Yeah. Now, of course, we have to talk about Mrs. Howell, Lovey, a name I assumed was an affectionate nickname, but apparently that's her real name, Lovey Howell.
That's so weird. This is back at also during the era when guys were like calling their wives mother.
Yeah.
Weird fucking time.
Yeah. Mrs. Howell was played by the wonderful Natalie Schaefer, who has become quite possibly my favorite character in all this after learning about her. She was heavily into Beverly Hills real estate and was probably worth about as much as her on-screen character at the time. But she came from a serious acting background. Between 1927 and 1959, Schaefer appeared in 17 different Broadway plays, as well as landing supporting roles in numerous movies. All this to say, she was experienced enough to know that the pilot script for Gilligan's Island was pretty silly. According to legend, she only took the job because it meant a free trip to Hawaii. But the thought of the pilot getting picked up for a full series seemed very remote, and when it happened, she was not pleased. "I didn't even want to be on Gilligan when I tested," she said. "I cried when I got the role." Apparently, she was on vacation in Mexico with friends when she got a telegram saying that the show had been picked up for series. And she did literally cry, and she was so hysterical that her friends thought she'd gotten a telegram saying that her mother died. The funny thing about Natalie Schaefer was that she was extremely secretive about her age. To even her close friends, she lied and pretended she was born in 1912, which would have made her about 51 or so when Gilligan's Island premiered. In fact, she was born in 1900, meaning she was in her mid-60s during the production of Gilligan's Island. To which I say, damn, yes.
Yeah, spry old bird.
She wanted her real age to be revealed in her obituary, reportedly because she wanted people to say, "She was how old?" I love that.
That's good stuff. Yeah, remember back before they probably laid her off and I don't know, maybe had her killed. People Magazine had a full-time research person who was in the library verifying stuff for.
Oh,
I think she might have been
Celine.
across a couple different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is she still there?
I don't know.
She alive? Anyway, when we had our orientation with her, I was like, who gives you the worst trouble with like this kind of verification and stuff? And she was like, Mariah Carey. Answered instantly.
Yeah.
It's like every time we print her real age, we hear about it. She doesn't believe in time.
It's even on her Wikipedia page. It's like birthday 1969/1970 question mark. Natalie Schaefer, she's got so many great anecdotes. In 1965, she told the Let's Be Beautiful columnist Arlene Dahl that she kept in shape by swimming in her backyard pool in the nude and by periodically following her special, quote, ice cream diet, which consisted of eating nothing but 1 quart of ice cream spread over 3 meals daily. She said she would she would lose 3 pounds in 5 days following that regimen.
Did she do it while crying? Because that's like how I usually get through it. Man, those old fad diets are so hilarious. What was the
grapefruit?
The white wine diet?
Well,
the grapefruit diet, yeah. I think I was reading in either White Album or Joan Didion's other one where she talks about like if I was over 100 pounds or over 99 pounds, I would just like eat grapefruits, drink coffee, and chain smoke only until I was back underweight.
The 60s.
Yeah, this was from Helen Gurley Brown, actually.
Whoa.
The Vogue, it's 1977, from her 1962 Sex and the Single Girl. Wine and eggs diet. 3 days, ballpark weight loss at 5 pounds. Breakfast, 1 egg, hard-boiled. 1 glass white wine, dry, preferably Chablis. Black coffee. Lunch, 2 eggs, hard-boiled is best, but poached if necessary. 2 glasses white wine, black coffee. Dinner, 5-ounce steak grilled with black pepper, lemon juice. Remainder of white wine, 1 bottle allowed per day, black coffee. Incredible. What a country.
Yes. Natalie Schaefer, a.k.a. Mrs. Howell, was clearly sensitive about her appearance. She had it written into her contract that there would be no close-ups of her during the show. A rule that apparently was forgotten very soon after production began because there are many close-ups of her. Natalie Schaefer also reportedly didn't like her ankles, so she had input in what Mrs. Howell would and would not wear, and it was rare for Mrs. Howell to be seen without pants. Let me rephrase that. You know what? Moving on. Despite her age, Natalie Schaefer did nearly all of her own stunts, which included jumping into the lagoon or sinking in fake quicksand. A badass. We stan.
We surely do.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
We have now come to the professor, whose real name in the show is...
Anybody? Nope.
John, Tim, Sasha.
Roy Brinkley Jr.
Okay. How do we learn that, Jordan?
It's in the pilot episode when the radio announcer broadcasts the name of all the missing passengers from the SS Minnow.
The professor was played by actor Russell Johnson, who got the role despite the fact that he refused the producer's request to take off his shirt during auditions.
Same.
Yeah. Former Husky kid? Did he swim in pools with a t-shirt on? That's what I did. Perhaps this was because Johnson could probably... you really hit it out of the park with the Zoomer slang on this one. Jordan wrote, perhaps this was because Johnson could probably body these producers. Was that because I talked about a chimp bodying you or something in the last episode?
Yeah,
Okay.
you did. Yeah. It was in my... Yeah.
Prior to his acting career, Johnson had served as a bombardier. Bombardier, I think. I assume it's bombardier, like boulevardier.
I always thought it was bombardier, but that's my American. Yeah.
In 44 combat missions over the Pacific during WWII, the big one. On March 4th, 1945, the B-25 he was flying as the navigator was shot down, killing the co-pilot and breaking both of Johnson's ankles. He would earn the proverbial boat load worth of medals, including the Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. His acting career included a role opposite future president and the Antichrist, Ronald Wilson Reagan, think about it, 6 letters in each name, in the 1953 film Law and Order, plus the 1955 Western Many Rivers to Cross, co-starring future skipper Alan Hale Jr. In the aforementioned Gilligan's Wake satirical novel, the professor is given a backstory as one of the chief consultants in the Manhattan Project. Love it.
That do anything for you?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Who was that guy? Who's this scamp who wrote Gilligan's Wake?
I think he was like an Esquire columnist or something.
Yeah, it tracks.
Well, from darkness we come to the lightness of Mary Ann. Everyone loves Mary Ann, or Mary Ann Summers, as it says on her birth certificate. Canonically, she is a farmer's daughter from Winfield, Kansas, a reference to Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, a reference that's hammered home with nods to Judy Garland's ubiquitous pigtails and gingham dress. The whole...
Oh, this is the gingham one.
Yeah. Okay. You remember Mary Ann. I know you remember Mary Ann, although you seem more of a ginger guy.
Which is brunette?
Mary Ann.
That one.
Ginger is...
Oh,
Follow
I see
me
it now.
here. Okay.
Yeah. See if you can keep up.
The whole girl next door ingenue vibe for Mary Ann was decided upon somewhat late, considering producers initially wanted to hire Raquel Welch for the gig, which would have been a very different show. Instead, they went with Dawn Wells, herself a former Miss Nevada 1959, and I believe a contestant in Miss America 1960.
I Miss Nevada. Who was her competition? Who was a runner-up, like a lizard? A cactus? Is out there other than Vegas?
Her dad owned an early strip hotel, the Las Vegas Thunderbird, I believe. Yeah. Mary Ann was a fan favorite on the show. She was especially popular with soldiers fighting abroad for truth, justice, and the American way, and mid-tier sitcom characters, apparently. Dawn Wells revealed in a Forbes interview, many vets from Vietnam have said that Mary Ann kept them going, kept them positive and focused on returning safely. They
just jacking it and jacking it and jacking it good. Jacking it well.
They kept my picture in their helmets. I have the utmost respect for what it takes to be one of America's finest, and I'm very thankful for what they do. Filthy.
Dun 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 dun. Push zoom on a guy, big Midwestern corn-fed guy, just hunched over in a pile of charred skeletons in the middle of a rice paddy, just furiously pounding it to this old girl.
On a, I guess, as much as I hate to admit
Lighter
it,
note?
no, sort of related note.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man. Although it's widely believed that you were not allowed to show women's navels on American TV in the 60s, people famously cite Cher as the first in the early 70s, that was not the case, at least for Mary Ann or Ginger on Gilligan's Island. This was an actual network edict, which Sherwood Schwartz amusingly described in his Gilligan's Island book. The CBS censors would allow belly button exposure in one scene as long as the character covered her navel in another scene, even if she was wearing the same outfit. Puritanical 60s for you.
Yeah, I mean, that was like an ankle in the Victorian era, right?
Yeah,
Guys
yeah.
were like gaga over that.
Yeah.
Good for her.
By guys, you mean...
You.
No, I was going to say Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, people committing atrocities. Yeah, for sure.
But back to Mary Ann, who kept her character's famous short shorts for the rest of her life. I really like that.
Good for her.
Yeah. She was a favorite on the show. Even recent online polls show her ranking #1 on the favorites list for the castaways on Gilligan's Island, followed by Gilligan himself. And sadly, Mrs. Howell was at the very bottom.
Oh,
I know, yeah.
Yeah, bummer. I'm sorry, bud.
I know, it's okay.
I know she meant a lot to you.
Not to pit women against one another, but the real the real fandom rivalry was between Mary Ann and fellow Gilligan's Island starlet Ginger Grant, played by Tina Louise. Dawn Wells had a good sense of humor about the rivalry, even admitting that she sometimes wore a t-shirt that someone had given her that read, Ginger or Marianne? The ultimate dilemma. Gross. Then again, Marianne can afford to laugh about this because she was always the winner between the two. As she puts it, you can go anywhere and say Ginger or Marianne. You don't even have to say what the show is, and everybody gets it, and I always win. And this is true. Bob Denver said in a 2001 interview that Dawn Wells received somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 fan letters weekly, whereas Tina Louise, who played Ginger, may have had 1,500 to 2,000.
That is tough. Tough road to hoe.
Dawn Wells likely took a certain degree of pleasure in Marianne's triumph over Ginger because in real life, there was some strain between her and the actress who played Ginger, that is, Tina Louise, who, as much as I hate to say it, is sort of the villain of this episode.
I'm sorry. I know she meant a lot to you.
To play Ginger Grant, her name a combination of Ginger Rogers and Cary Grant, producers initially wanted to cast a real-life movie star, the silver medalist of 50s blonde bombshells, Jane Mansfield.
Now most famous for that picture of Sophia Loren looking angrily at her cans.
Or getting decapitated.
Eh?
She had in the car accident, and she wasn't decapitated. That was the myth.
Oh,
that was the Hollywood Babylon-esque myth.
Didn't that actually happen to Isabel, somebody, like a famous dancer?
Duncan, her scarf,
Isabel Duncan, yeah.
Scarf got caught in the car and drove off, and I don't know if it decapitated her or just strangled her.
Yeah, it got close, probably. Yeah. Just hanging by a thread.
She had some kind of like parting line or last words or something.
Lovely day for a drive.
Farewell, my friends. I go to glory.
Yeah, that's pretty metal. Was this as she was choking to death or as she was getting into the car?
She wore a long, flowing, hand-painted silk scarf, a gift from her friend, the mother of American filmmaker Preston Sturges. That's weird. As they departed, she reportedly said, farewell, my friends, I go to glory. Her silk scarf, draped around her neck, became entangled in the wheel well around the open-spoked wheels and rear axle, pulling her from the open car and breaking her neck. She was taken to the hospital where she was pronounced dead.
Like immediately after she said that, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
What a way to go. That's how I'd like to go out.
So not horseback.
No, I've changed it to vainglorious statement followed by neck snapping at high speeds. What were we talking about?
Tina Louise, Ginger from Gilligan's Island. Yes. Producers nearly cast Jane Mansfield, but Jane Mansfield turned down producers of Gilligan's Island for fears that she would be typecast as a dumb blonde. I say this with all love and respect because she was a brilliant, well-read woman. A little late for that. In 1963, after The Girl Can't Help It in 57, and okay, anyway.
Yeah.
Producers went with Tina Louise, who had actually appeared alongside Jane Mansfield in the October-November issue of the Fredericks of Hollywood catalog, which is sort of a forerunner of Victoria's Secret, where she was billed as Hollywood's fastest rising star. She also released smooth jazz records in the late 50s, backed by the legendary jazz player Coleman Hawkins. That do anything for you?
Yeah, he's pretty famous as one of the guys who pushed swing music into what we consider bebop, and famous as one of the, huge tenor saxophonists of the era.
So she sang with him. She also was a star in Italian sword and sandal epics like The Siege of Syracuse and The Warrior Princess.
Cool.
Yeah.
I support those things.
She also appeared in the 1964 Tony-nominated play Fade Out, Fade In, and also in the teen summertime surf movie For Those Who Think Young, which was a blatant Pepsi cash-in, alongside Nancy Sinatra, a super young Ellen Burstyn, later to star in The Exorcist, and future Gilligan star Bob Denver.
Have you seen that one?
I have not, no.
Okay.
A real sort of yin-yang tragedy of her acting ambitions can be seen in the following pair of lines from her Wikipedia page. Tina Louise began studying with Lee Strasberg and became a member of the Actors Studio. In 1962, she guest starred on the situation comedy The Real McCoys, playing a country girl from West Virginia in the episode Grandpa Pygmalion. All this to say, like Natalie Schafer, Tina Louise had worked long enough to know that Gilligan's Island wasn't exactly high art, and she was not exactly fond of her role in it. Unlike Natalie Schafer, she was very bad at playing along. According to numerous reports, Tina Louise clashed with the show's producers, apparently because she was under the mistaken assumption that she was playing the main character. I guess her agent had allegedly pitched this to her as the story of an actress stranded on an island with 6 other people. Presumably, he hid the fact that the title of the show was Gilligan's Island. There are stories that she tried to get out of her contract mid-series, which would have a disastrous effect on her relationship with her co-stars, as we'll see. She would famously be the only cast member who refused to appear in any of the post-series TV movies or cartoon series. In a January 1965 edition of TV Guide, an article about Bob Denver, the star of Gilligan's Island, mentioned the on-screen tension between Tina Louise and the rest of the castaways. It was so bad that it was mentioned in contemporary interviews. That's hilarious. Denver will not say why he and the glamorous Tina Louise do not get along, nor will any of the castaways. They just ignore her, and she ignores them. Between scenes, while the other 6 principals chat and tell jokes together, she sits off by herself. And recently, when Denver was asked to pose for pictures with her, he adamantly refused. Denver eventually agreed to do a photo shoot with Tina Louise for the TV Guide cover in May of that year, 1965, but only if Don Wells, Marianne, was included. Then, to his immense displeasure, Wells was cropped out of the final image.
Oh, man. Just what a silly world we live in. Of course, while we're on the topic of characters, we have to mention the doomed vessel, the SS Minnow, which in many ways could be considered the 8th lead of the show, above Mrs. Howell. I always assumed that this was just a cute nautical joke. I didn't. Jordan always assumed that this was just a cute nautical joke, naming a tiny boat after a baby fish, but the name is much deeper and actually much, much pettier. The Minnow is named after a man named Newton Minnow, who was at the time the chairman of the FCC. He had made waves.
Hold for applause.
In the television world in 1961 with a landmark speech entitled Television and the Public Interest, in which he took aim at TV producers for making formula comedies about totally unbelievable characters and creating a vast wasteland of bad television. Sherwood Schwartz did not take kindly to this knock against his medium, so he named the doomed ship in his sitcom after Newton Minnow as an in-joke to his fellow TV producers. Accounts seem to vary about how much Schwartz actually disliked Minnow, but apparently the FCC chairman had a sense of humor about the whole thing, and reportedly the two exchanged friendly correspondence. In the biblical sense. The boat that was used for the opening credits for the 2nd and 3rd seasons of the show, aka the ones in color, had been previously named the Blue Jacket, and in 2006 it was sold in Nanoose Bay, British Columbia. People came from all over the world to view the boat, speaking in hushed tones while in its presence, according to the broker. "We wanted to know where Marianne slept," said one man. Okay, leaving that one right there. The asking price for it was $99,000. Seems undervalued.
Yeah.
It underwent a 2-year restoration by the Schooner Cove Marina, where it is used for charters and sightseeing tours. Who knows if they're 3 hours? On the east side of Vancouver Island. The owner, now doing business as Kelland Ventures, equipped it with an old life preserver with SS Minnow on it, as well as other items that nod to the show.
Before becoming the series we know and love, Sherwood Schwartz and Company filmed a pilot for Gilligan's Island in 1963 that promptly went missing for 30 years. Then, in the early 90s, an employee of the TBS network started reading a book about the show and made some calls to the corporate office, Turner Entertainment, who owned the syndication rights. Soon, the network executives found the negative for the pilot, which had been collecting dust for some 30 years in the archives of the Turner-owned MGM United Artists Film Library. TBS then aired that episode, titled Marooned, for the first time in October 1992. One of the biggest differences between the pilot and the final series is that the cast of castaways featured different characters. Instead of a movie star and a Midwest farmer? I don't know what Marianne was. We'll call her a farmer.
Farmer's daughter, brother. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
The pilot included 2 secretaries. One was named Ginger, she was played by the actress Kit Smythe, and the other was named Bunny and played by Nancy McCarthy.
Nothing weird there.
Yep. Also, instead of the professor, there was a high school teacher played by a guy named John Gabriel.
Do they have like Fifth Beatle thing, like Stuart Sutcliffe, where they just like have been dining out on that almost being cast for like
you
their
know
entire
what?
lives?
That's a good question. Or Pete Best? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Another major difference here, this will interest you. Another major difference with the pilot was that it was missing the famous sea shanty theme tune. Instead, it featured a rather lame faux calypso number written by none other than John Williams, the most famous film composer of all time. Yes, he was still known as Johnny Williams at the time. Though they would eventually lose that theme, he would continue to write incidental music for the first season of the show.
Did we have a similar, like, recently acquired state or something with, like,
Calypso?
somewhere in the Caribbean that spurred the Calypso boom?
You know what? It might have even just been like Harry Belafonte or something. I don't know what.
Yeah. I think that is honestly what you can chalk it up to, but I don't know. It's
a
so
boom.
funny, man. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there was that whole viral TikTok thing, like, God, what are we in, 2 years ago, where there was that Elaine Stritch's "Are you having any fun?"
Oh, yeah.
Robert Mitchum, as I think we've talked about on this show before, cut a Calypso album.
Oh, right. Yes. He
just looks like the surliest, most hateful lounge singer of all time on the cover.
Yep.
Nothing about that man radiates island cheer.
And maybe I'll splice it in here. The original Gilligan's Island
Robert
theme.
Mitchum's Calypso song?
The original Calypso-styled Gilligan's Island theme, that was only used for the pilot. It was sung by Sherwood Schwartz himself. He wrote the lyrics, too. He sang it in a faux Caribbean...
There it is.
Accent? I don't know what you call it.
A black scent.
Sort of.
Pejoratively.
Yes. Shockingly, there is no mention of a 3-hour tour, but instead a 6-hour ride on this early theme, which honestly makes more sense than 3 hours.
No.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
Yeah.
In tropical sea is a tropic port. Vacation fun is the favorite sport. This is the place where the tourists flock, renting the boats at the busy dock. 2 secretaries from USA sail on a Minnow this lovely day. A high school teacher is next aboard, all taking trips that they cannot afford. The next 2 people are millionaires. They got no worries, they got no cares. They climb aboard and they step inside with just enough bags for a 6-hour ride. Tourists come, tourists go, tourists touring to and fro. These 5 nice tourists, they take this trip, relaxing on deck on this little ship. The weather is clear and the sun is hot. The weather is clear? I think it is not.
Sherwood Schwartz would ultimately swap out the theme tune to the more familiar one we know and love, presumably because the Calypso craze of the late 50s had given way to the folk group boom of the early 60s with bands like the Kingston Trio. So Schwartz wrote one of the all-time great explainer themes called The Ballad of Gilligan's Isle with composer George Weil. He would do the same for the Brady Bunch 6 years later. For the first season of the show, the song was performed by the folk act The Wellingtons, who also performed The Ballad of Davy Crockett, heard in the Disney miniseries of the same name. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. That song rules.
I was a Davy Crockett. I had the coonskin cap and everything.
Yeah, I feel like being from, and I mean this as somebody who spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania as a kid, very Pennsylvania.
Davy Crockett?
Yeah, I don't know.
One of the heroes of the American Southwest? Wasn't he at the Alamo?
I don't know. But the coonskin hat just seems...
Okay, sure. We do have raccoons.
So you were saying?
Oh, I was just trying to think of anything interesting that this George Weil guy had done. He was musical director of the Flip Wilson Hour. Musical director. He was director and arrangements of the John Denver Christmas album with the Muppets.
That rules.
There we go.
Denver to Denver.
Second John Denver reference. Moving on. All right.
Sadly for the Wellingtons, their version of the theme tune was booted for seasons 2 and 3, when Schwartz used a group called the Eligibles. but the Wellingtons got a featured role on an episode of Gilligan's Island called Don't Bug the Mosquitoes, where they portrayed a Beatle parody group called the Mosquitoes. In another bit of Gilligan's Island's 60s pop crossover, Marianne's singing voice on the show was dubbed by none other than Jackie DeShannon. Put a little love in your heart, what the world needs now, whenever you walk into the room. Favorite of my dear friend DJ JBJ. Come on, Jackie DeShannon's great.
Yeah, I know her. I know her name. Good for her, I guess. I mean, this was like during the glory days of residuals. Like, these people did not work again.
No, we'll talk about that later. This was right before.
Oh, I mean, I guess I was talking about anyone that had a hand in the theme song, but that was also before those changes went in, presumably.
Maybe, yeah. Part of the reason Sherwood Schwartz changed the theme tune for the later seasons is because he wanted to include the Professor and Marianne in the lyrics. Famously, the early version of the theme ended with "and the rest" after the movie star. And this was a truly hilarious move, considering it was a show with 7 people and they'd already shouted out 5. just put the other 2 in there.
Cut it for time. Cut it for time.
The actors who played the Professor and Marianne had a sense of humor about this, though, and they would often sign correspondence to one another as the rest, which I think is cute.
Yeah.
The first season opening credits are all over the place thanks to absurd negotiations by the actors' agents who wanted to earn their 10% and stroke their clients' fragile egos. As a result, the opening credits to the first season of Gilligan's Island are a copy editor's nightmare. Bob Denver comes up first with starring Bob Denver. Makes sense. Alan Hale follows with no starring, just Alan Hale and his picture. Jim Backus is next with also starring, and it lists his character. He's the only one who has his character listed so far. Natalie Schaefer is next with no starring and no character name. And finally, it ends on, and also starring Tina Louise as Ginger. So the hierarchy seems to go Jim Backus and Tina Louise, since they are both starring and have their character names listed in the opening credits. Bob Denver, who's starring but doesn't have his character name listed. And then Alan Hale and Natalie Schaefer, who at least get their names on the screen. But poor Don Wells and Russell Johnson, who played Marianne and the Professor, get nothing. They lose. Good day. This didn't sit well with dear sweet Bob Denver, and once the show was renewed for a second season, he asked the producers to add the Professor and Marianne to the opening credits.
No.
Unfortunately, the producers cited a clause in Tina Louise's contract which said that no one would follow her name in the credits.
Oh, that's so funny.
Bob Denver countered by referring to a clause in his own contract which stated that he could have his name placed anywhere in the credits he wanted, and he threatened to have his name moved to last place, which would be absurd for a star of the show, especially a show named after his character. So following a new agreement with Tina Louise, a revised theme song was recorded, with Johnson and Wells taking the rightful place in the opening montage, The Professor and Marianne, which scans so much better. And the rest, that's such a weird...
Is that the debut of that phrase? I don't know where I even picked it up from.
And the rest,
okay. Yeah. Man, what movie were we talking about? Was it Paul Newman and Clint Eastwood, or Paul Newman and somebody else, where they like... Was it Towering Inferno or one of those?
Yes, it was Towering Inferno.
Yeah, where they jockeyed that someone's name would come up first, but the other guy's name would come up, even though it came up second, would be come up higher, right?
Yes.
Or they were offsetting it that way.
And I think on the poster too, they were at like a certain angle, like one was angled up and one was angled down. It's so funny.
What a weird era to put so much emphasis on this stuff. I mean, you guys are all gonna die penniless, or not if you invested wisely, but alone.
We'll talk about that. Actually, the only person on the show that actually was smart about thinking ahead and getting residuals had to start a GoFundMe towards the end of her life.
Yeah, I'm saying it's sad. Yeah. Stop caring so much about your names. I don't know. Did I take a note from, who is it? Bones McCoy, the guy from Star Trek, who was like didn't really act again and would just like go to fan conventions and pay all of his bills from like the fan circuit.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. Star Trek sucks. I tried to watch Wrath of Khan the other night. I was just like, what do people see in this? Honestly.
Interesting. I'm sort of surprised to hear you say that.
Oh my God. It's the action scenes in that movie are like, composited spaceship shooting a rotoscoped beam of light, and then they just shake around an interior shot. Like, how the did people think this was interesting? Ricardo Montalban does like half of his acting behind like a console. Like, it's just, these are not good. I don't know. I'm never going to get Star Trek. Do you care about Star Trek? Other than like sort of the kitschy Shatner aside.
I grew up, my dad, in a very uncharacteristic move, he's not a big Trekkie, but he loves Star Trek.
Okay.
That would make him a Trekkie, I guess. He watched Next Generation a lot as a kid, so I have fond memories. Next Generation is a good show. I mean,
that's supposed to be the much better one.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those things where I started watching it during the pandemic, and I reached out to a friend of the pod, David Long, and I was like, man, I don't get it. And he gave me that classic, like, yeah, you just got to wait till like season 3 before it gets good.
Aren't there only 3 seasons of Star Trek?
Oh, no, TNG went.
I thought you meant original.
But yeah, he was like, yeah, it just doesn't really pick up until like the 3rd season. He's like, and that's like the consensus for the show, where people will be like, it will be like the most unutterably silly dog shit that humiliates you to like sit in front of it and actually take it in as like media, and then like profoundly moving meditations on the human spirit. I just don't have the patience for that, man. We're all dying. What are we talking about?
Speaking of dying, the pilot, bear with me here. The pilot was filmed in late November 1963 on the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, I know what's happening then.
They planned the film.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun. No,
the
wrong
60s
era, actually.
began.
Sorry.
No, it was when the 60s began.
But what would have been a topical song?
Times They Are A-Changin'?
Yeah, on the eve of destruction.
That was 65, right? But I'll give it to you.
63 would have been Blowing in the Wind.
Blowing in the Wind, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Times They Are A-Changin'. That might have been 64. They planned to film the SS Minnow setting off on its infamous 3-hour tour on the morning of November 22nd, 1963, from Honolulu Harbor, but the shoot was interrupted by news of President Kennedy's assassination. R.I.P. JFK, you would have loved Gilligan's Island. He never got to see Gilligan's Island. Isn't that awful? A friend of mine was just talking about how, it was something that I do, and I didn't know anyone else did, but he mentioned it the other day, how, like, I measure when I hear, like, various historical figures or...
Where it was in relation to the Kennedy assassination?
No. It was just like, Joseph Mengele died in 1979. Joseph Mengele presumably was aware of Greece. Like, that's weird.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
Yeah, things like that.
The other one where it was like Coca-Cola was already a thing when Dracula came out. So in theory, Dracula could have enjoyed a Coke.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's great.
Well. So as Lyndon Baines Johnson was sworn in as president, it was announced that all military installations, including Honolulu Harbor, would be closed for the next 2 days for a period of mourning. So filming of the Gilligan's Island pilot was delayed by several days as a result. And in the opening credits, as the SS Minnow cruises the harbor, an American flag can be seen flying half-mast in the background. A mute tribute to a national tragedy.
They're on the eve of destruction. Barry Maguire, whatever happened to that guy? You interviewed him probably, right?
No, but I would have. That seems like...
Yeah, that seems like a you thing.
I was just talking to somebody today about how I interviewed John Sebastian from The Love and Spoonful, and I emailed him asking for an interview, and he called me within 3 minutes and was like, "You wanted an interview? Here I am." And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't mean now."
He's like, "I'm just sitting at home, staring into nothing."
And so I had no questions, so I just talked to him for like an hour, and then he just kind of wandered off.
That's so funny. My favorite tidbit recently, actually the only like celebrity interview I've done really recently, was John Anderson of Yes.
When was that?
Was here like, so he's writing a musical based on the life of Marc Chagall.
Cool.
Because in one of these bizarre things that only happens in like the bygone era, he was, I believe, introduced to Marc Chagall by Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones. And they just became like famous friends, and like they hit it off like a house on fire, whatever that phrase is. And John Anderson began in between periods of working on Yes stuff, he was just writing a musical about Marc Chagall and his life. And one of the early workshops that he did for it recently was at the school that I work for, the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And yeah, but it was crazy that I got to interview him, and I was like, you're John Anderson. But he was just like, he has the most hilariously high voice, which makes sense when you hear him sing.
Yeah.
But like, not everyone with a high voice has a high speaking voice. But he got on the phone, and I actually thought it was like a lady assistant, because it was like, "Hello, is this Alex?" I was like, oh, this is great. And then we were just talking about like what we were doing during the day, where I was like, yeah, this is great, man. I'm just sitting at home. I just had lunch, and I'm talking to John Anderson of Yes. And he was like, yes, well, I was just watching Lord of the Rings when I was on the treadmill. Stars sometimes really are just like us, and in the most hilariously mundane ways. I was like, extended cut? Yeah, good times. Okay, so CBS executives were not bowled over by Gilligan's pilot, but it did well enough to score well with 3 different sets of test audiences: the elderly, the insane, and children. However, this convinced the brass to include the show in the fall 1964 lineup, but they wanted some changes made. First of all, they wanted to replace the 3 cast members who had tested the lowest with audiences. Once again, the audiences being chimpanzees, dogs being kept from panicking by the TV staying on while their owners were at work, and hobos warming up in bus stations. I can give you more groups of 3 if you want. I can do that again.
I'll splice those in.
Yeah, just loop it in. John Gabriel, who played the high school science teacher. Kit Smythe, who played Ginger as a secretary. That feels like a Star Wars villain nickname. Can you imagine Shatner biting into that phrase? Kit Smythe. And Nancy McCarthy, who played Bunny, the other secretary. Schwartz battled with CBS president Jim Aubrey, who didn't like the idea that the castaways would be stranded permanently, a.k.a. the entire premise of the show. Has anyone posited Gilligan's Island as the Bardo? Have they?
I don't know.
Like they did Groundhog Day being the Bardo?
That's interesting.
Anyway, eventually Aubrey and Schwartz struck a deal. If the ratings started to tank, Gilligan and company would get rescued in a craven ploy for ratings and continue their exploits on the mainland. Today we call that pulling a second season of Twin Peaks.
Oh. Or After MASH.
Your references are a little dated, Jordan. Just some notes for you as we continue
our third
into our
hour
own interminable second season. Have we ended the first? Are we dead? Who's to say? Anyway, the CBS president would eventually create his own show based on the premises of a family who operated a tropical marina. It was called The Baileys of Balbo, and it lasted only a single season before it was canceled. Schwartz had to face down another CBS executive named Hunt Stromberg Jr., who hunted humans in his spare time with that name, and he felt strongly that they should add a pet dinosaur to the cast.
You know what this needs?
Yeah, oh man, I love this country. We just get what we deserve. This man had more power than God at one point, probably. He probably had women killed, disappeared. Certainly hookers who got pregnant via his stars. And this is just what he did. He took meetings, he chain smoked, he drank, and he said like, add a dinosaur. Amazing country. Amazing century, the 20th. In his book, Inside Gilligan's Island, Sherwood Schwartz recalled watching the show's pilot episode with Stromberg while they were being filleted. When they got to the part where Gilligan climbs a tree to survey the island in search of resources or signs of life, Stromberg excitedly suggested that Gilligan should find a dinosaur, which he could then walk around on a leash and treat like a pet. Just picture it, Stromberg reportedly said. It's our answer to Mr. Ed. As with most ideas that come from your boss, Schwartz did his best to humor him and pretend that they were actually considering the idea of putting a dinosaur in the show. They even made inquiries to Disney, who had just developed a technique to seamlessly place animated figures into live-action footage. Was this Song of the South era? Or would have been...
That was like 20 years earlier. Wasn't it like 47, 48?
Well, that was... we talked about this, because it was Mary Poppins.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. You're right. You're right.
Ultimately, this proved to be the saving grace for Schwartz and Co. since the budget projections were way too high to utilize this new technology for CBS. And CBS would then hold on to the whole dinosaur bit for the 1980s cartoon series, Gilligan's Planet. Why the not? They were on cocaine by then, so it came back around, you know?
How do you feel about that? Would you like a dinosaur on Gilligan's Island?
I would, absolutely. Yeah.
For a treat? Okay.
Yes, for me, as a treat. The dinosaur could be like, maybe only Gilligan could see it.
I like
the
that.
dinosaur
Like
could be
Gazoo.
a ghost.
Oh.
Yes, but then in that way, he could be like Gazoo. He could be like a ghost of a dinosaur that died on the island, and he would only talk to Gilligan and say things like, "Why did they come to me to die, Gilligan? Won't you stop the screams?"
So
I don't know.
Is Gilligan son of Sam and the dinosaur is the neighbor's dog?
Father is telling me to do this. Yeah, he's the only one I didn't really buy as a CIA plant. Like
Bob Denver? Oh, son of Sam.
Yeah, Berkowitz. But he may have been a patsy. That's the other prevalent theory among Burke heads, as we call ourselves. Son of Samiax. I'm coining that. Been asked bit already. I'm going to start the California chapter of the Son of Samiax.
Son of Samaniacs.
You know, your idea's good too. Son of Samaniac. If you guys want to vote in a poll, get us onto Twitter. I'm at Alex_Heigl. I don't know what Jordan is off the top of my head. He can punch it, but just tell us, what do you prefer? Son of Samaniacs or Son of Samiacs? It's cleaner. Mine's cleaner. Anyway, Jordan, what were we talking about again?
We're talking about the lore of Gilligan's Island. That's what we're talking about. First and foremost, we have to talk about the 3-hour tour. Now, Zoolander voice, why a 3-hour tour? In other words, what was the reason that those 5 passengers set sail that day with the skipper and Gilligan? Apparently, they were headed for a remote Club Med-style resort in Hawaii, which was owned by the Howells Consortium.
They were going to hunt humans.
The Howells were going to go for a month. Marianne won the trip on a radio station sweepstakes. She was apparently hoping to meet a rich man during her 2-week stay. I've seen that the professor was going to be speaking at a convention, or he was taking some time to unwind before writing a book entitled Fun with Ferns. And Ginger, I think, was booked at the resort as a singer/performer.
None of those are tours. Those are one-way destinations.
A leisurely cruise out to get to the resort. I think that was the idea.
Oh, okay, I don't know. Tour to me implies a circuit, a closed loop, if you will.
But that explains why they all have their suitcases of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, yeah.
All right, we'll work on this.
Okay.
We can fix this.
I can fix him. In the world of the show, the titular island, Gilligan's Island, is said to be roughly 250 miles south of Hawaii.
No, what other island, Jordan? Was that a necessary clarification?
But in real life, the island shown in the opening and closing credits of the show is Coconut Island, a small outcropping in Kenai Bay on the northeast shore of Oahu, Hawaii. But we all know Gilligan's Island wasn't possible without some movie magic. The set was located on CBS's Studio City lot, where an outdoor lagoon had been built. I've seen some sources say that this was the same set used for the creature from the Black Lagoon, but I don't think that's true. I thought that was in Universal, but I would like to believe that.
I mean, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Universal had the money, did all that stuff.
Yeah.
Also, why do I think some of that was shot in Florida?
Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny you said that. I thought so too.
It was. Second unit where all the underwater shots were done in Florida. Wakulla Springs, Florida.
Does it say where the lagoon set was?
On water scenes were filmed at Park Lake on the Universal backlot.
Okay, so it was backlot. Cool. Producers initially tried filming Gilligan's Island on location in Malibu, at least for some scenes, but encountered problems due to the fog rolling in off the sea. So they moved to a studio lot. But filming at Studio City came with its own unique challenges. The proximity to the Ventura Highway, meant that they had to stop filming at rush hour due to traffic sounds.
Was that Eagles? What was that song?
That was America.
Oh.
Produced by George Martin, Beatles producer.
Oh.
Oh.
All right.
Ventura Highway's a great song. America's kind of great.
I just know the horse song.
Horse with No Name. That's kind of one of their least good songs.
Yeah, I fucking hate that song.
Yeah, but they've got some good songs.
It has like one of the most unforgivably stupid lyrical conceits.
The Heat Was Hot.
Well,
there's a lot.
Add another to that list. No, I always hated when he says he's like cataloging things in the desert, and he says the rocks and trees and things.
And things, yeah. Well, also the Horse with No Name. I mean,
yeah, you could have just named it.
Yeah.
Why did you let it go through that whole period? That's on you.
You're in the desert. You don't have much else to do.
Yeah. Just the most meandering, plodding, like that song feels turgid.
Like wandering in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. I guess that they have that. That's kind of a clever meta concept, is that it feels like being dehydrated in the desert and your body shutting down.
It feels like lactic acid building up in your calves, yeah.
Friend of the pod, lactic acid.
Making its TMI debut.
It's your first debut of the show. Folks, let's hear it for lactic acid.
Now I have to keep this whole bit. I was thinking of ways to cut around it, but I can't now.
Enemy of the pod, America. We'll just let you choose which one. Can't go wrong.
During the winter months of filming on the studio backlot, the water temperature in the Gilligan's Island lagoon would plummet to around 40 degrees, which is not far off from Titanic temperatures, requiring Bob Denver to wear a wetsuit beneath his Gilligan costume. Tragically, and this I am genuinely sad about, fans could no longer visit the Gilligan's Island lagoon because in 1995, it was paved over and turned into an employee parking lot.
Literally the Joni Mitchell song.
Yes.
They paved paradise and...
I think it was parking garage, actually, but for our purposes, we're going to go with parking lot.
Yeah, canonically.
Hilariously, the U.S. Coast Guard received numerous letters purported to be from fans of Gilligan's Island, wondering why they weren't doing anything to help those 7 nice castaways they saw on TV.
Oh.
Apparently, they thought Gilligan's Island was...
A documentary?
A documentary that was being broadcast by, I don't know.
On an astonishingly regular basis.
Yes.
God, this country, man. The leaps for that. What a... man. Just makes me think of that Carlin quote. Like, think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize that statistically half of them are dumber than that. So illuminating. I
thought this was just like an apocryphal story, but I've seen numerous.
Of course, I believe it.
Yes. According to the military-themed blog We Are the Mighty, Gilligan's Island producer Sherwood Schwartz got a message from the Coast Guard, followed by a series of telegrams submitted by Good Samaritans who wanted a rescue team sent out to save the SS Minnow castaways at once. The blog tracked down an example of one of these telegrams saying, "For several weeks now, we have seen American citizens stranded on some Pacific island. We spend millions in foreign aid. Why not send one U.S. destroyer to rescue those poor people before they starve to death?" Schwartz said in an interview for the Archive of American Television, "Now, who did they think was laughing at what was happening to these people?
Yeah. And the whole crowd.
Where do they think the music came from? And the commercials?" Sherwood Schwartz would go on to say that these viewers were, quote, delusional.
And also, while I have you, what's to be done about this terrible Planet of the Apes I've been hearing about? We landed on that before our own moon? I know the timeline doesn't work, but we just did it last week, so it's a bit.
It does work. It does work. 1968 was when moon was 69.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How fucking dumb. My God. Simple folk.
Or,
what's the line from Blazing Saddles? The common people, salt of the earth. Morons.
I maybe it was a prank, but I sort of don't think so.
Dude, I guarantee you there was someone, in the 60s who was like, saw this and was like, they wouldn't lie to me on the TV. Those folks have got to be really out there. What were we talking about?
We're talking about the most important part of the show, Heigl. Getting off the island.
Yeah. Why couldn't the crew escape from the island or achieve completion? Who were they thinking of? Were they lying back and thinking of England? Apparently,
thinking of England.
What? Oh, that was to Victoria, right? Not one of the Elizabeths.
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Yeah. Obviously they had an absurd amount of supplies with them, considering they were merely on a 3-hour tour. Marianne and Ginger, for example, never wore the same clothes twice. The professor had an expansive library, and the Howells had all their crap. Numerous in-universe reasons have been cited, and it all has to do with the group's own incompetence. Blame most often falls on the professor. As has been oft cited by hacky stand-ups for centuries, he could build a phone out of coconuts, but he couldn't fix a hole in the damn boat. This isn't strictly true, however. There was an episode where they attempted to use a glue that Gilligan had accidentally discovered that came from tree sap. Although strong, the glue turned out to be very, very temporary, and when it gave out, the boat fell totally to pieces. There's another episode where he made his own nails, which shattered upon being hit by a hammer. Professor appeared to be unfamiliar with navigation by sail or star positions, which would have been extremely useful in determining their position. Blame also falls on Skipper, who is nowhere near as aggressive as he could have been. Sexually or physically? You mean in skippering?
Yeah, in skippering. Is skippering a verb?
It is now.
To skipper?
Language is malleable.
That's jazz, baby.
That's it's been cited that the island needed to be roughly within 500 miles of Hawaii, or else the castaways would have died of thirst by the time the crippled Minnow drifted there. That's roughly 3 to 10 days of sailing time. If a raft had been constructed with a sail, yet this was only done once, and it failed almost immediately. Had Skipper been a better sailor and navigator, they would have been rescued relatively quickly. And they also met an unusually high number of people on the island who would have failed to notify the authorities of their location. These people are often referred to as sociopaths in online forums. And of course, there's Gilligan, who simply seemed too stupid to be held accountable for his ups. As one anonymous forum poster notes on Quora, had Gilligan died or been, quote, eliminated, the group likely would have escaped or been rescued in short order. You think they would have drawn straws to see who had to kill Gilligan? Or would they all take hands choking him so the blame would be distributed equally? Or they all have crude coconut-rigged firearms.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And one of them is given a blank.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages.
Oh, now we're going to one of my favorite sections of the show that we have not gotten to do anywhere near as much as I thought we would have. Heigl's Fan Theory Corner.
We should have done with apes. Just me postulating wildly about apes.
Not the movie, just the primates.
Just apes. Just my theories about them and where they're going.
Where they've been, where they're going.
Why are they always so busy? What do they have to do? I don't like it. There's been a persistent rumor for years that each of the 7 castaways on Gilligan's Island represents one of the 7 deadly sins. This theory takes an even darker turn, postulating that the castaways actually died in the storm at the heart of their episode, and that the island is actually a hellish afterlife where they're due to live out eternity for their sins. That harkens back to antiquity with Dante. Each level of hell is a different sin. But unlike the Minnow, this theory actually holds water.
Just ripped that out of the typewriter and read it over to myself and said, God, I'm good.
You've done it again. Runtagh, you've done it again. Professor,
we're doing Gilligan's Island.
Did you have to trim your Hughesian nails and beard down to even reach the phone and dial my number? We've spoken on the phone twice? 3 times in our pushing 10-year friendship?
Usually when bad things are happening.
Someone mailed the set of keys to my apartment to an undisclosed location in Brooklyn. Those keys were never found, by the way.
Those keys were never found.
We bring in Robert Stack making his trademark 3 steps towards the camera and pause, and it's like, update. Those keys were never found.
If you were a loved one.
Okay. Know where the spare set of Jordan's keys are.
Oh, I don't care.
Please give them back to him. It's really alarming to me that someone is just trying every house and every home in the borough to see. Anyway, the professor is guilty of pride. Mr. Howell was greed. Ginger is lust, which, hey. Marianne represented envy because she yearns for Ginger's looks and lifestyle. The skipper is supposedly at both gluttonous and wrathful. Poor Mrs. Howell doesn't have a sin dedicated to her. presumably she's grandfathered in with her husband. Gilligan is, according to this theory, Satan. Because Satan. I don't know where I went walking with that.
Church lady.
Or the church, Satan. Because he constantly foils the group's plans for rescue. And he's always dressed in red.
He is.
Shockingly, Sherwood Schwartz, nice alliteration, bud. When a little buddy. Jordan is physically larger than me. He frightens me sometimes. Shockingly, Sherwood Schwartz went a long way towards confirming this theory. According to NPR, he admitted that the 7 deadly sins aspect is true and did factor into his creations with characters. Jury's still out on the whole Satan thing, though. There are some who have noted the similarities between the Gilligan's Island's characters and the 1939 film Five Came Back, starring Lucille Ball. The characters in that film include a wayward pilot, co-pilot, a botanist and his wife, a sultry woman with a shady past, and a rich playboy and his homespun wife. This was just a plagiarism accusation. There's nothing related to Satan in there.
I don't think there's anything related to Satan, no.
Bummer.
Earlier...
Speaking of death...
Yes. Earlier I laughed at the idea of Mrs. Howell, quote, doing her own stunts, but there were actually more risks involved during this production than I would have assumed. Case in point, the time Alan Hale, a.k.a. the skipper, fell out of a coconut tree on set and broke his arm. Hilariously, or sadly, I can't tell which, he didn't tell anyone about it for fear of holding up the shoot. In the book Inside Gilligan's Island, Sherwood Schwartz recalled talking to Hale at the season 1 wrap party, where the jolly actor made some offhand comment about being relieved that the shooting was complete because now he could take care of his arm. When Schwartz asked what was wrong with his arm, Hale nonchalantly replied, "Oh, I broke it a few weeks ago." He went on to explain that 3 weeks prior, he had missed the crash pads when he fell out of the coconut tree for a scene and smashed his right arm on the stage, and he hadn't sought medical treatment about it because he didn't want to disrupt the filming schedule. And Schwartz was dumbfounded. How did you manage to haul coconuts and lift Bob Denver with a broken arm?
Because he was made of sterner stuff than this generation.
It wasn't easy, Hale replied. That's sad. Bob Denver had a scary moment of his own involving a lion. Sort of a Siegfried and Roy moment.
Did he, Jordan?
He did. In one scene, Gilligan was supposed to barricade the door of the Howells' hut closed to escape from a lion, and in a classic comedic twist, discover that the lion is actually inside with him.
Ugh.
Although this was all part of the plot, the lion wasn't supposed to attack. Narrator voice. It did. It was very aggressive and roared towards a terrified Bob Denver. Fortunately, the bed it was standing on split apart, and its trainer had time to tackle it before the lion could eat the beloved sitcom star. Fortunately, the lion was so big that the bed that it was on broke.
And then the trainer just came after it? Like,
put 4 in the chest.
Different generation. Just like, okay, I gotta tackle this lion now.
Yeah.
Stubs out cigarette, tosses back rest of drink. Gotta kill this lion I brought in.
But in another nod to a changing era, Gilligan's Island went from black and white to color for its second season, and would welcome guest stars like Don Rickles, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Kurt Russell, who I think played like a kid,
like a feral child.
Yeah, exactly. Richard
Awesome.
Kiel, who played Jaws in Moonraker, one of the Bond movies.
Yeah, one of the big. Do you have acromegaly?
I forgot what he had. He was in Happy
Also
Gilmore
famous
too.
for being the. Yeah, I was gonna say the
Big guy.
the guns don't kill people, I kill people
people.
guy. And from. Yeah. Good stuff.
Mel Blanc also had a guest role in Gilligan's Island, and so did Phil Silvers, Sergeant Bilko himself. Though Gilligan's Island was never a critical success, it never even earned an Emmy nomination, it consistently notched a spot in the top 25 shows for its first 2 seasons. But by the 3rd season, it struggled to break the top 50, even though it still had a 30 share, which is old school network speak for 30% of all viewers tuning in at 7:30 p.m. on a Monday. The numbers were strong enough to earn the show a 4th season, but in 1967, the show was given the boot to make way for, appropriately enough, Gunsmoke. According to Ben Costello's book Gunsmoke, An American Institution, CBS canceled the popular Western in early 1967 after 12 seasons, leaving it off the fall schedule. Hilariously, Alan Hale Jr., a.k.a. Skipper, was friends with Gunsmoke writer Paul Savage and offered him his sympathies, saying that if any CBS show should go, it was, quote, that turkey, Gilligan's Island. Alan Hale would come to regret saying this. Apparently, CBS had decided to get rid of Gunsmoke while network chairman William S. Paley was on vacation. When Paley was back at his desk, he uncanceled Gunsmoke because it was his wife, Babe Paley's favorite show.
There it is.
Yep.
It's like in Oppenheimer when the guy's like, well, when we're going to bomb Japan, just make sure it's not Osaka. The wife and I honeymooned there. It's a beautiful city.
Yep. He had to get creative with the scheduling. And in order to find a spot for Gunsmoke to come back in the fall 1967 lineup, he had to cancel Gilligan's Island. That's where the axe fell. So, after 98 episodes over the course of 3 seasons, Gilligan's Island was over. And due to this abrupt end, the series was given a cliffhanger ending with the castaways still stranded on the island.
Do they see like a boat approaching in the distance or something? Or is it just
No, I think it was midstream. I thought they had another season to go. But Sherwood Schwartz was undeterred. He kept on trucking with the Brady Bunch in 1969, which proved to be, I'm pretty sure, an even bigger success. But apparently he felt the whole take a lot of diverse people and stick them in a dangerous environment idea had not been fully mined yet. And in 1974, he premiered a show called Dusty Trail, which was basically Gilligan's Island in the Old West. He even went so far as to tap Bob Denver to play the lead in the show, which chronicled the adventures of a wagon train featuring a rich couple, a scientist, a farm girl, and a bombshell.
Incredible.
Yep.
What a country.
The show was a disaster and canceled after just a single season.
Wait, it went to order?
Yep.
God damn, dude. So he literally couldn't. I mean, what was his pitch for that?
Gilligan's Island in the Old West.
Yeah, it's like the John Draper chalkboard meme, like Air Bud, but he's gay this time or whatever. Like, he just walked in and was like, Gilligan's Island in the Old West. And they're like, great, let's take it to pilot.
I mean, people probably pitch shows on less using shows that they didn't create. So at least in this case, he was like, yeah I made this show. I'm not going to sue you for it.
I guess that's fair. Yeah.
So Dusty Trail axed after a single season, but nevertheless, Sherwood Schwartz persisted, ripping off himself.
Can you say that? Can you say that?
He spun Gilligan's Island off into a cartoon series called The New Adventures of Gilligan in 1974. At the time, it was very popular to do animated versions of hit live-action TV shows. See The Brady Kids and The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, among surely many others. The New Adventures of Gilligan lasted 2 seasons until it was canceled in 1975. But a new animated series would take its place in 1982 called Gilligan's Planet. I think we mentioned this earlier, where the dinosaur was a pet. Lasting a scant 13 episodes, the series depicts the castaways being adrift in space. The professor builds a spaceship for their attempt to get back to civilization, but the ship crash lands on a planet very much like the island they lived on. But of course, it had more land for them to move around on, and dinosaurs and aliens and creatures that they could interact with while the professor tried to repair the rocket. It's like that Family Guy bit with Stephen King where he's like, it's a haunted lamp.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I think it's I think it's that's almost like a Twilight Zone pitch. Like they get off an island and they wake up and they're in a new planet.
Yeah. It's like it's so stupid.
They do the crane zoom out and they're like, it's not fair. It's not fair. There was time now.
Oh, that one makes me sad.
Yeah, that's a crushing episode.
Yeah. No.
Probably that's the one I think about when I think about Twilight Zone. That and the Bill Shatner Gremlin one.
I think of the one where the little kid who would send people out to the cornfield with his mind.
Did you do that as a child?
No, but he's like starting fires.
Just try doing that.
Do you remember that one, right? It was really creepy.
I don't think so, no.
Oh, wait a minute.
The thing is, like, I think Twilight Zone is so easily Mandela affected because so many things have just taken the premise of one of those hundreds of episodes and either become more famous or more of a punchline.
No, here we go. It's called It's a Good Life. And it's from 1961. 6-year-old Anthony Fremont has godlike mental powers, including mind reading. He has isolated his town of Peaksville, Ohio from the rest of the universe. He has blocked television signals and caused cars not to work. He creates grotesque creatures such as three-headed gophers, which he then kills. Everybody is under his rule, including his parents. The people live in fear of Anthony, constantly telling them how he does everything good, since he banishes anyone thinking unhappy thoughts forever to a place that he calls, quote, the cornfield. Having never experienced any form of discipline, he does not understand that his actions are harmful. He's confused when his father tells him that the neighbors are reluctant to let their children play with him after he sent several of his playmates to the cornfield.
I did not know that.
You would like that one. It's very scary.
Yeah. Sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I don't trust children that don't have godlike powers.
Yeah. Check it out.
All right. I will.
We're getting some places in this episode. We really are.
Yeah, we sure are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, before we move on, Dawn Wells provided the voice both of her character and Ginger because, as we'll discuss, Tina Louise didn't win anywhere near this.
Her vengeance complete. You don't have to choose between the two of them because now one is both.
Yep.
It would have been cool if they'd been fused into a hideous David Cronenberg-style monster from, like, Cosmic Rays or something, and they crash, and she's on the planet like, kill me! That would have been cool. So that would be the end of Gilligan's Island as a television series, but we here at TMI would be remiss if we hadn't mentioned a trio of made-for-TV movies that are really something special. It started with 1978's Rescue from Gilligan's Island, the first proper continuation of the series that had ended a decade earlier. After a long wait, fans were finally treated to what they were waiting for. Chance for the seven... You wrote it.
I know, I'm sorry.
A chance for the 7 castaways to get off the island after being stranded for 15 years. This naturally drew a sizable audience. The story begins when Gilligan finds a small metallic disc, which he fashions into a necklace. The professor somehow determines that the disc is a remnant from a spy satellite that exploded in the stratosphere above the island and uses it to make a barometer, which in turn allows him to forecast the weather. In doing so, he determines that a massive storm is about to decimate the island. The castaways build a series of huts for protection, which they lash together, before the governor of Hawaii sent in the National Guard to beat all of them. Topical humor. When the tsunami hits, the huts are carried out to sea, where they're discovered by a passing ship. They're rescued. Gilligan is interviewed on TV. The makers of the spy satellite notice Gilligan's necklace and try to get it back in various dastardly ways. It's all quite silly, but the most insane part of the film is arguably the fact that Gilligan and the skipper want to open another boat charter service. You'd think they would do something like a kitty ranch or a petting zoo, something landlocked. A fish farm, maybe. They really want to stay close to you get great farm-caught salmon these days.
Oh.
I don't think that's true. I think you're supposed to get wild caught. Having done so, the skipper and Gilligan invite the original 5 passengers on his new and improved SS Minnow. And guess what happens, folks?
You'll never guess.
One of the stowaways turns out to be Joseph Mengele. Alive at that time, as we've discussed.
In 1978, you're right. He'd just come from seeing Grease.
The ultimate crossover episode.
But he didn't get to see
boy.
Goonies.
No, he did not live to see Goonies. His loss. Boy, we're just stepping in at this one. So Rescue from Gilligan's Island was followed a year later in 1979 with The Castaways on Gilligan's Island, which picks up where the prior made-for-TV movie, which left off, where you could really skip it because the castaways are actually back on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Surely not renamed by this point, right? Like they had to discover it had a name. Like it was called like Bloodshell Island or like Kamakawibu o Pupuawele.
Well, it's an uncharted desert isle. That's the whole point. It still hasn't been charted yet. Remember in the theme? Uncharted desert
A
isle.
3-hour tour. Close?
3 hour.
Am I doing it,
3 hour,
Papa?
3 hour tour island. It's like 3 Mile Island, but
Oh, which happened that year, right?
3 Mile Island. I forget. Yeah, you're right. 79.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm making connections.
The storm contaminated, it's all about connections. The storm contaminated the water supplies on the island, so Gilligan was tasked with exploring the island in hopes of finding a new source. Eventually he finds a WWII, the big one, era airplane hangar, complete with planes. Apparently it had been hidden for years in the underbrush. which had been blown away by the recent storm, along with that insane Japanese soldier who never surrendered and was still like attacking people in the Pacific theater.
Yeah. Until probably around this time. Or maybe it was like the late 60s.
That's a crossover.
Yeah.
Damn. What was that guy's name? Japanese.
I forget. We got to talk about
soldier.
cargo cults, though.
Hiru Onoda. He was in the Philippines. He killed 30 people.
How many of those were after the war was over? Several, if I recall.
I mean, enough of them.
When did he, I don't know if he surrendered, but when did he leave the cave he was in? It was a cave, right?
Just broadly, the jungle.
Oh.
Yeah, 1974. They could have
Jesus.
fudged the timeline and made it happen. Man, that would have been awesome.
30 years.
Gilligan's Island meets Hiru Onoda, and then they're just all brutally killed by this mentally insane guy hiding in the jungle.
I mean, that could have been an incredible twist, as if they are going through the island and they stumble on what they think is some kind of modern civilization, and then they realize that it's a cargo cult, one of those cults that during
Jordan, tell us about cargo cults.
Yes. Well, I'm doing this off the dome, so I'm not going to get this perfect, but there were cultures on different Pacific Island nations where their first contact with technologically
Anything.
advanced, anyone who wasn't their own, group of people on the island was during the war, when these huge planes would fly in and drop supplies, and they would set up, what we now think of as like modern runways and modern army camps and stuff. And then after the war, they all left again. And these cultures on these islands thought that, these visitors were divine, and all the things that they brought were gifts from the divine. So to try to kind of coax them back, they would build what looked like modern airports with planes on the runways, all out of like straw and sticks and underbrush. And they would kind of reenact what we would see people working on runways do. They would have like those like ping pong paddle looking things and kind of direct, and they would have a fake plane at the end of the runway. And I think they would even have like one of those radar tower things. It was really fascinating. You can see videos of this online. And there's also a cargo cult that thought that Prince Philip was divine. And I don't actually really know why that was. And he was like informed of them, and he like acknowledged their existence by sending them like an autographed 8x10 glossy. And then and then like they were so touched that they sent him like I think it was like a hog killing stick, and he was like advised to pose for a photo with the stick, just to like and so he sent a photo back of him with the stick. Yeah, they thought the Prince Philip was divine, and then they were very, very distraught when he died.
As were we all.
We all were. Cargo cults. I'm glad we got that in there. Cargo cults.
Yeah, absolutely. Cargo cults.
But think about if the Gilligan's Island castaways stumble on what they think is like an American army base or a Western army base or any kind of army base.
Could have been a decoy cargo cult like thing, and they would have been slaughtered.
Well, oh no, I was going to say then they discovered that it's just a cargo cult. None of the stuff actually works, and all the planes and stuff are made out of like twigs.
Coconuts again.
Yeah. That would have been a great twist ending.
I'm imagining like a Saw kind of thing where they're like, they meet like Hiru Onoda, and they just it's a brutal man against man, occasionally man against woman race for survival, and it's just horrific, just really awful stuff. Would you like that?
I would.
If I turned your beloved cherished childhood thing into essentially a snuff film is what I'm pitching. You would, wouldn't you? You sick son of a bitch. Yeah, that'd be great. Is it in the public domain yet?
Saw? Oh, Gilligan's Island.
That was a joke. I know neither Saw nor Gilligan's Island have entered the public domain. How much of a rube do you take me for? One of those people who thought it was a documentary? Yeah, Alex, the documentary has lapsed into public domain. It's been 100 years. You're just living out your life at the farm. Well, I'll tell you again about the rabbits. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So he finds this World War II era thing, and it contains not a half-crazed Japanese soldier, but they fix one of the planes, apparently easier mechanically than fixing a hole in a boat, and they escape from the island. Which one of them flew?
I don't know. Might have been the professor.
Unfortunately, the plane develops engine problems while in flight, so Gilligan is sent out with a parachute to drop some cargo. And, of course, he falls off the plane, landing back on the island. Again, it's the Bardo. You can't escape unless you achieve nirvana. The castaways decide that they have to go back and get him, even though they're well aware that the plane could never manage another takeoff. And God, they would just wave to him in real life. Maybe do some thanks. Immediately after, we finally got rid of that fucking guy. But immediately after landing, the engine falls off. The group realized that had they kept going, they would have certainly crashed into the ocean. Thus, Gilligan's accident saved their life, and he is hailed as a hero. Blah, blah, blah. Fortune continues to smile on the castaways. A Navy captain spots their aircraft on his radar. He pinpoints where they land. They're taken back to civilization. And the island is charted on a map so that no one will ever be stranded again. Flash forward a year, the island has been transformed into a tropical resort owned by the Howells, who employ their fellow castaways as staff. But wow, as you put it, what a metaphor for American capitalism. Someone transporting people back to the site of their most lasting trauma and forcing them to work for him, or pitching that he work for them and relive it every day of their life. The skipper and Gilligan provide the shuttlecraft that takes guests from the mainland to the resort and back again. And the whole idea was that this was going to be another backdoor pilot, because it never ends.
It was like Fantasy Island meets Love Boat.
Meets Die Hard, meets Saw, and it just keeps going. You get an island and you get an island, just never ends. The whole idea was, but never materialized. Viewership numbers for this were significantly less than the previous Gilligan-centric made-for-TV movie, which is a phrase that you can say and mean it. Jordan?
Shockingly, I can't believe you didn't take this one. There was another made-for-TV movie that followed, and it sounds like a bit that we'd make up. I'm referring to, of course, 1981's The Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island. We got to add that to the sequel format rotation.
The Harlem Globetrotters meets The Deer Hunter. Yeah. Harlem Globetrotters meets Schindler's List. The Harlem Globetrotters. It would just be the Harlem Globetrotters meet Oscar Schindler. Man. Good times.
The Harlem Globetrotters plane is forced to make an emergency landing on what had formerly been the uncharted, deserted island known as Gilligan's Island, when they are rescued by Gilligan and the skipper and taken to their place of work at the Howell Resort, which is now run by Howell's son, Thurston Howell IV, played by supermarket sweep host David Ruprecht. This had fans of the show up in arms because the couple had previously been portrayed as childless. This whole sun coming in thing was reportedly because Jim Backus was in poor health, as we will discover. Upon their arrival to the island, the Globetrotters agree to play a game against the staff of the resort, who naturally lose badly.
He's using a friggin' ladder. You bet against the Harlem Globetrotters? Simpsons, as is everything.
There's a bad guy played by Martin Landau who wants to buy the island because he discovers there's a rare ore buried on it, and he nearly succeeds in purchasing the Howell's Island through various devious methods. But then, for some reason, he agrees to not buy the island as long as the Globetrotters can beat his basketball team, the New Invincibles, who we learn...
That's a sick name, though.
Yeah. Who we learn are robots. I don't know if the Globetrotters know. I mean, in a way, this is kind of the best sequel.
Yeah. It is. Is this still available?
I would like to quote, I think it is. I would like to quote from the Wikipedia directly. At first, it looks as though the Globetrotters have met their match, but when Gilligan reminds them that they haven't been doing their usual Globetrotter tricks, they begin to score against the team and win. Guys.
You guys aren't even using the ladder.
The bad guy, though, doesn't really care because while everyone was busy watching the basketball game,
he stole the
ore and loaded it onto his yacht. The professor then tells him that the ore is very unstable in its present form, much like us both.
And it blows up?
And it blows up, destroying the bad guy's yacht and leaving him penniless.
And dead.
And maybe dead, I don't know.
Wow.
So
incredible. I have goosebumps. I was on tenterhooks this whole time.
It's very good. For the response to the movie, I would like to quote the Wikipedia entry once again because it can't be improved upon. Sherwood Schwartz was surprised and disappointed that the ratings were not higher. He lamented that he would never get the opportunity to produce another spin-off special that he'd conceived, Murder on Gilligan's Island.
Yes!
Which would have involved a group of famous detectives investigating the apparent murder of one of the castaways. I think apparent being the operative word there.
Wouldn't even be. It wasn't even like a twist on like an Agatha Christie thing where there's only one detective. Would have been a group of detectives.
Many. And maybe they're all like famous detectives from, maybe it's Hercule Poirot, maybe it's
others. Yeah,
who else? Elliot Ness. I don't know. Who are other famous detectives? Sherlock Holmes.
Ness, the guy Elliot Gould in Philip Marlowe.
Yeah.
Actually, it could be multiple Philip Marlowes. You could have Bogey with CGI these days.
Oh,
you
yeah.
could resurrect Humphrey Bogart and have him playing alongside Elliot Gould's Philip Marlowe from Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye. Now, what this presupposes is that there are multiple timelines in which Gilligan's Island exists on a I'm sorry, wasn't leading anywhere with that. My God, was Shorts kind of very lucky and had like two good ideas, and then he continued sincerely believing he'd done something?
Or brilliant.
It's such a fine line, isn't it?
I mean, to quote Spinal Tap, such a fine line between clever and stupid.
Wow.
He also was very sad that he never got a chance to move ahead on another idea for a Gilligan's Island movie.
There's no way you can improve on Gilligan's Island, the detectives.
This is pretty good. The castaways would learn that a nuclear war had destroyed human civilization.
Yes! And zombies?
Bob Denver, this is a quote from Bob Denver. He would describe the premise thus. The seven of us think the world is destroyed and we get married. Gilligan marries Marianne and they have a baby boy. The professor marries Ginger and they have a baby girl. And there's like a Blue Lagoon sequence where the kids grow up and I would imagine sleep together. So when Gilligan's son is 20, he sails off to see whether the world is really destroyed. And of course it isn't. They heard it on the radio. And Gilligan broke the radio just before the disclaimer came on.
Wow.
So it plays the long con with some horrific, slightly Oedipal. I guess it's not Oedipal, but still.
It's inbreeding. Those kids would be inbred within a number of generations, certainly.
Mm-hmm. In a way, when you think about it, aren't we all inbred? Yeah. What's the real inbreeding? The friends we made along the way?
Oh, man. The only thing left would have been Gilligan's Island with zombies.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. What happened? Oh man, maybe they turned to cannibalism.
It's too easy.
Yeah, it is easy, but fun.
Effective, yeah.
And cinematic. Oh, and then it turns into an even more horror thing where they're breeding just to eat them. Not very cost effective, but you get it's a pyramid scheme. You get kids to have kids, and you eat those kids, but you retain a couple pairs for, the bloodline, because the purity is what's important here, Jordan.
I admire its purity.
I just watched that the other night. Perfect fucking film, man.
Wait, is that Alien or Aliens?
It's the original Alien. Yeah, it's a much. Honestly, I've come around to it being a much scarier film. Like, even though there's all that claustrophobic action and stuff in Aliens, and there's like more genuinely like horror kind of big sequences, and the alien looks better. That first one is that's a classic Ridley, the Scott editing touch, because Tony also kind of did that, but it's just breathless pacing. Perfect. Gilligan's Island versus Alien. Oh, no, dude, I've got it. Gilligan's Island Predator, Gilligan's Island. Get Shane fucking Black on the phone and Lloyd Schwartz.
Oh, yeah.
We got to pitch this today. We have to pitch this today. God, that is a license to print money. We'll get the nostalgia bait. We'll get the, Predator's perennially hot. He's always a hot package. Or them. We don't actually ever really know. Maybe we bring back in, we bring back in Schwarzenegger. We just cart him on set for a day. He calls Gilligan little buddy. Oh. And then the Predator disembowels him.
Can you do Schwarzenegger saying little buddy?
Little buddy.
That's going to be my new ringtone for you. Well, that's great. Let's let that marinate.
This is why we need the pitching podcast.
This is verbal copyright.
Verbal copyright. Yeah. Anyone who,
that's the name of the show.
This ball,
that's the name of the
verbal
show.
Copyright.
Verbal copyright.
They really should have done Gilligan's Island meets Star Trek. Come the fuck on.
I mean, it's a little Flintstones meets the Jetsons, though.
How dare you? How very dare you? Titanic?
Oh.
Gilligan meets Titanic.
One of the survivors swam a long ass way.
Yeah.
Or they're just on an iceberg instead of an island. Gilligan's iceberg.
Yeah. Oh,
we are such good executives.
We are killing this right now. What were we talking about?
Oh, yes, more
Predator,
TV
Gilligan's
reunions.
Island. Yeah, right.
More
Got
TV
legs.
reunions with the castaways, which are nowhere near as interesting as these made-for-TV movies. There was a 1987 episode of Alf titled Somewhere Over the Rerun, which featured Alan Hale Jr., the skipper, Bob Denver, Gilligan, Russell Johnson, the professor, and Dawn Wells as Marianne, all in character. There was also a 1995 episode of Roseanne, I still don't understand why this occurred, that featured Gilligan's Island actors playing roles in the Roseanne sitcom. I guess this is somewhat fitting because the two shows were filmed on the same CBS soundstage. Bob Denver played Jackie, Dawn Wells played Darlene, and they even managed to coax a rare appearance from Tina Louise, presumably because she was given the lead role of Roseanne. Aside from the Roseanne cameo, Tina Louise only ever appeared with the cast on 2 TV talk show reunions, once in 1982 on the Good Morning America show, and another time in 1988 on The Late Show with Ross Schaefer, where the 7 castaways were joined by Sherwood Schwartz. And it was the last time the 7 ever reunited on television.
Okay, so music changes. Music goes to minor key now. We have to get serious. But I just wanted to point out that there's a Gilligan's Island musical. So
By who?
some theater kids.
Sounds awful.
So yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. They're dying.
Gilligan's Island experienced a resurgence when it was included in a retro syndicated after-school programming block for Ted Turner's nascent TBS channel in the late 80s. And it was given a further boost thanks to its inclusion on Nick at Night and TV Land throughout the 90s and early 2000s. This led to a semi-revival of the show during the peak of the reality TV boom in 2004 with the TBS series The Real Gilligan's Island. This Survivor-esque show featured a cast of contestants marooned on an island in what I've seen referred to as, quote, the Mexican Caribbean, a phrase I have never heard before or since, and forced to complete challenges inspired by the original sitcom. Naturally, each castaway was matched to the character type from Gilligan's Island. There was a captain, an actress, a millionaire's wife, and, I don't know, a klutz. Though it was given the predictable marketing blitz by TBS, the show was a flop and canceled in 2005 after 2 seasons. Sadly, this would have been the last Gilligan's Island-themed event that Gilligan himself would have witnessed in his lifetime. Bob Denver had an interesting post-Gilligan existence. He actually was somewhat relieved when the show was canceled, presumably because he went straight from a, I would imagine, demanding role on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis straight into Gilligan's Island. He told a reporter that I've only had 1 day off in 3 years. Hilariously, once Gilligan's Island was canceled, he bought a sailboat, the sight of which was often met with onlookers singing a 3-hour tour at him. Because of course,
that's the theme song.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He apparently didn't love that. I don't know why I find this so interesting. He apparently replaced Woody Allen in the Broadway production of Allen's play Play It Again, Sam in 1970. And later in his life, he owned an oldies format radio station. Bob Denver was married 4 times and arrested twice for marijuana possession.
Hell yeah.
Which is sort of not surprising considering his iconic characters were a beatnik and a klutz. The first incident occurred in February 1971 when drugs and drug paraphernalia were found in his car, to which he pled no contest. But the more bizarre instance took place in 1998 when he was arrested for marijuana delivered to his home, supposedly sent to him by Dawn Wells, a.k.a. Marianne.
Hell yeah.
He would refuse to rat Marianne out in court, however, instead testifying that, quote, some crazy fan must have sent it. He pleaded no contest and received 6 months probation.
That's right, because Denver ain't no snitch.
Yeah. Sadly, Bob Denver was a heavy smoker of all things, and in 2005, he received cancer treatment and a heart bypass. He died on September 2nd of 2005 at the age of 70 from complications following his throat cancer surgery. This is where it gets a little weird. Apparently, Bob Denver and death are old friends because way back in 1961, in his pre-Gilligan days, he was reported dead more than 36 times in more than 30 states. For reasons that are totally beyond me, it became a common prank to call a newspaper and ask, is it true Bob Denver is dead? Purely done in an attempt to annoy him. He was quoted at the time as saying, "At first it was spooky, then it seemed like a gag, but when it kept up, it made me somewhat angry." Hilariously, weirdness continued even after Bob Denver died, for real. In September 2012, Twitter exploded with the news of his death when someone retweeted an MSNBC obit that was 7 years old. Because people don't read, they assumed it was breaking news, and the tweet went viral, leading some not especially cautious news outlets to post the not technically inaccurate news that Bob Denver had died, except they failed to note that he had died 7 years earlier.
Oh man, that's rich.
In a way,
rich text.
It's a very Gilligan-esque end to Bob Denver's life.
Oh hell yeah, good stuff. Bring it home for me, baby.
It's really good, yes.
The skipper, unlike certain members of the Gilligan's Island cast who we'll talk about, Alan Hale Jr. had no problem embracing his legacy. In a 1967 episode of Batman, he plays a cook at a diner named Gilligan. Actually, not his character name, as keen-eared fans of the show picked up on. In the 70s, he ran a restaurant just off LA's Sunset Strip called Alan Hale Jr.'s Lobster Barrel. Yeah.
Come on, that's funny.
It's fine. I guess, but my first thought was immediately, well, how were the cheddar biscuits?
Ooh.
Each place setting was decorated with a photo of the skipper, and Hale himself would often drop into his place in his own costume to greet diners. After the place closed, he launched Alan Hale's Quality and Leisure Travel, an agency that arranged for boat tours. In the 80s, he revived his character once again for episodes of the 60s TV show reboot The New Gidget, as well as episodes of Growing Pains and the aforementioned episode of Alf. He even appeared in an ad for Canadian car dealership, imploring viewers to visit Ensign Chrysler Plymouth in Victoria. Tell them the skipper sent you. So clearly it didn't take much for Alan Hale Jr. to don his skipper costume. As he would say in 1988, "Skipper has become my alter ego. I'm one and the same now." Okay. Alan Hale Jr. had to die so the skipper could live. Do you see?
There is no Alan Hale Jr., only Skipper.
Do you see? My great becoming? Little Thomas Harris reference for you.
Wow.
Gilligan's Island meets Hannibal. Because he goes into hiding on the resort that they founded.
Is that at the end of Silence of the Lambs? He's walking off into...
Yes, he's walking into Gilligan's the resort.
Yes, that's good. That's very, very
Verbal
good.
contract. Verbal trademark. Alan Hale Jr. admirably did a lot of work for charity even when he was being treated for cancer, a diagnosis he kept so private that even his wife didn't know about for a time until she figured it out on his own. That is the most mid-century male shit I can imagine.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, man. And this was the guy, of course, who had kept his broken arm a secret for weeks.
Yeah.
He frequently visited children's cancer wards to help cheer up the kids. And when a child inquired about his own cancer-related weight loss, Hale told him he was going to be playing Gilligan in a new Gilligan's Island show. There's a famous story of him visiting a young, terminally ill Gilligan's Island fam in costume, as he himself was dying, telling him, "The skipper is here, and everything is going to be all right." Hale died in January 1990 at the age of 68, and appropriately, his ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean. Now on to the professor. Not a ton that's interesting about him. He had a cameo on an episode of Newhart as a hotel guest who gets evicted from his room while watching an episode of Gilligan's Island. And as he's dragged out, he protests, "I want to see how it ends," whereupon he is assured that the castaways do not get off the island. Johnson also played the sheriff in several episodes of Season 9 of Dallas. But to Jordan, his most famous non-Gilligan part is his role in the 50s sci-fi classic This Island Earth, which has been parodied in the full-length feature version of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Have you seen it? It's good.
No.
Jokes are a little better in the movie, I think.
Well, they had more time with it. Probably not. Russell Johnson also made the convention circuit thanks to the MST3K appearance, where he regaled crowds with what else? Mostly stories from filming Gilligan's Island. He would later co-author a book titled Here on Gilligan's Isle.
Here on Gilligan's Isle. That's the...
It's so weird calling it that. Like it suddenly turned to ash in my mouth.
Well, the theme is Gilligan's Isle. Here on Gilligan's Isle. It's not island.
But who the says that?
Maybe there was a trademark. Maybe somebody verbally trademarked Gilligan's Isle in the title.
Could have been like the whole George Romero Night of Living Dead, where the one guy got the phrase "living dead" and George Romero got the chronological thing.
Oh, yeah.
Hollywood. The book. Yeah, he would later co-author a book, Here on Gilligan's Isle, which offered behind-the-scene anecdotes and the revelation that the professor's many experiments were actually scientifically correct. Presumably, Johnson was a bit of a tinkerer. He told a story about buying tools at Builder's Emporium one time when the clerk stopped him and asked, "Are you going to fix the radio?" Cute. He died of kidney failure in 2014 at the age of 89. Less cute.
Speaking of less cute, it's over to Mr. Howell. To quote Morrissey, he was the first of the gang to die.
Jordan, are you a Surprise Smiths fan?
It's smattering.
Smattering.
That was solo. That was a late solo. That was like, I want to say like 2007, 2008.
That was a solo Morrissey?
Yeah, first of the gang to die.
Who's listening to him? I guess, yeah, a lot of
It's a
people
good song.
Anyway. All right.
Some of our British listeners, I think, are familiar. That was a big hit. Anyway.
We have British listeners?
Yeah.
My apologies. Both for being British and all of the things I've said.
Yes, our friend John. Yeah, he went to, he's a big fan of our Titanic series. Hi, John.
Oh, right. Yeah. Hey, John. Sorry I said all that stuff about the British. Constantly. All right, Jordan, take it home.
Yes, Jim Backus, who played Mr. Howell, he suffered from Parkinson's disease in his later years, and he was in very poor health throughout most of the 80s. That was apparent in the Harlem Globetrotters abomination in 1982. In 1987, he had to be bodily carried into Sherwood Schwartz's 70th birthday party because he could not manage the steps into Sherwood's house.
Christ.
Around the same time, he reunited with his former co-star Natalie Schaefer in an advertisement for, I don't know why this occurred, Orville Redenbacher's popcorn, playing the Howells one final time before passing away on July 3rd, 1989. Speaking of the Howells, Natalie Schaefer, she had a tough time adjusting to life off the island. In a 1989 interview with the St. Louis Dispatch, Schaefer detailed how the role limited her acting opportunities. She said, "Most of the young executives and casting agents don't see past my role in Gilligan. I was on stage for years before the show, and I can still do drama, but they don't see it that way." She died in 1991 of breast cancer at the age of, I think, like 91. She had a long life.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. She was childless and left a significant portion of her fortune to her favorite teacup poodle, with instructions that the money be donated to the Motion Picture and Television Hospital after the dog's death. The hospital now has a Natalie Schaefer wing.
Not the dog. They should have named it for the dog. I'm sorry. That's obviously what they should have done.
It's rumored that Natalie Schaefer also left some money to her Gilligan's Island co-star Dawn Wells, a.k.a. Marianne, who lived with and helped care for Natalie while she was sick during her final days. Marianne, though. Marianne continues to be the best. She cared for Natalie Schaefer. She sent pot to Bob Denver, I would hope by his request, because if not, that was a mean-spirited prank that resulted in lawsuits. She went golfing regularly with Alan Hale and was the only cast member to attend his funeral service. Upping her karmic cred even more, she owned a company called Wishing Wells. Her name is Dawn Wells, which made clothing for people with disabilities.
Oh.
So, we love Marianne. She was set to play the role of Nora in Disney's live-action movie Pete Dragon, but bowed out at the last minute. I'm not sure why, and was replaced with Helen, I Am Woman, Reddy. She also auditioned for the role of Lois Lane in 1978's Superman alongside Christopher Reeve, but lost out to Margot Kidder. I could see her being really good in that. What do you think?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a part that Marianne did get. The spokeswoman for Idaho Potatoes. That's right, folks.
Idaho Potatoes.
Idaho Potatoes spokeswoman. She got the gig in 2004 and performed her duties with great aplomb over the years. In fact, a publicity video released by the Idaho Potato Commission featuring Wells demonstrating the perfect way to peel an Idaho potato went viral, racking up 10 million views on YouTube. I can only assume there's some kind of fetish that we are not aware of.
Yeah, that's a Midwestern thing.
So Don Wells, in addition to being extremely kind, was also kind of brilliant when it came to business. The premiere of Gilligan's Island took place just before syndication became a common practice in sitcoms, and all the actors signed deals that guaranteed them a certain number of money per original episode, plus a residual payment for the first 5 repeats of each episode. Because that was how it was done in the mid-60s, since TV shows were usually only rerun as summer repeats between seasons. But Dawn's husband at the time was a talent agent, and he advised her to ask for an amendment to her contract, promising her residuals in perpetuity. The producers didn't care, because they never assumed that the show would be airing 6 years later, let alone 60 years later. And as a result, Dawn Wells became the only cast member to continue to earn money on the show throughout her entire life. Sherwood Schwartz also did, because he created the show, obviously. He earned an apparent $90 million from Gilligan's Island before his death in 2011 at the age of 94. $90 million from Gilligan's Island alone, not to mention the Brady Bunch.
Fucking country. My God.
Well, hold that thought, because there's some more uniquely American twists in this. Unfortunately, what I imagine to be sizable residuals and her inheritance from Natalie Schafer were not enough to shield Dawn Wells from the evils of the American healthcare system. In 2018, a friend started a GoFundMe page for her benefit to assist in healthcare payments after she was reportedly, quote, desperate and, quote, lost everything in her life savings due to an unexpected life-saving surgery and 2-month recovery period in a hospital.
Christ. See, that's why you got to keep acting, man, because you get the SAG insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Just enough to qualify.
Yeah. According to Fox News, it was a botched surgery to repair a broken knee. The GoFundMe description detailed that Wells had been struggling financially since the 2008 recession and needed extra help in paying off her hospital bills and also some additional IRS penalties. There it is.
Yeah, Dawn, you scamp.
Thankfully, she earned nearly $200,000 from the crowdsourcing platform, which I feel is only fair, considering all the joy she's given people over the years. Sadly, she died on December 30th, 2020, of COVID-19. The week prior to her death, she recorded a Happy New Year video to release on the holiday, which fell a day after her death. Ugh. This leaves Tina Louise as the sole surviving cast member of Gilligan's Island, which proves that the universe has a sense of humor, because she famously hated the experience, believing that it ruined her acting career and led to her forever being cast as Ginger analogs. Tina Louise attempted to shed her comedic image by playing darker roles, such as a heroin addict in a 1974 episode of Kojak,
Nice.
and a cruel corrections officer in the 1976 television movie Nightmare in Badham County. As Russell Johnson, the professor, would say, she, quote, divorced herself from the show as soon as it went off the air and refused to participate in any of the reunion projects between 2 one-off talk show appearances in the 80s. In that way, she's like Jan from Sherwood Schwartz's other smash, The Brady Bunch, who also declined to participate in a lot of reunion TV spinoffs, and also, I think, played like a teenage runaway or a hooker or something, try to shed her Brady Bunch image. Anyway.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah. In Tina Louise's defense, she reportedly offered to appear in 1978's Rescue from Gilligan's Island made-for-TV movie, but the salary she demanded was considered too high. Dawn Wells, as we mentioned earlier, voiced both Marianne and Ginger's characters in the cartoon Gilligan's Planet, which may have been partially responsible for the beef between them. They reportedly turned down many requests to appear on TV together and also in ad campaigns over the years, reportedly because they never much cared for one another and didn't speak for a long, long time. The big exception I've seen was a 90s Old Navy ad, which featured the pair reprising their roles as Marianne and Ginger, still stuck on the island. I wasn't able to find that, though. I did find some island-based Old Navy ads, but I couldn't find that one on YouTube.
You know, island-based Old Navy ads. That old saw.
Set on an island.
Yeah. I think I remember that commercial.
Yeah, I think I kind of do, too. But it seems highly Mandelable, though.
That's true.
Yeah. Tina Louise's relations with series star Bob Denver were rumored to be strained as well, but in 2005, she wrote a brief, affectionate memorial to him in the year-end farewell issue of Entertainment Weekly shortly after his death. However, in December 2020, I would assume shortly before Dawn Wells died, considering she died on the 30th, unless they got it right under the wire on the 31st, Tina Louise denied that she ever resented the role of Ginger Grant. Never true, she said. I love doing my part, especially after they really started writing for my character. Originally billed as a Marilyn Monroe type. A different director took over and really started to write for my character. I really loved my character.
Without naming her?
But at the end of the day, why wouldn't she? It's a show that brought 3 generations by now, 60 years of fans, so much joy. And consider, I think we've just hit exactly 3 hours.
Oh,
I think that's an appropriate place to end our 3-hour tour of Gilligan's Island.
nailed it.
That's all.
I was thinking of other Gilligan's Island spinoffs.
What you got?
Gilligan's Island Escape from Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Gilligan's Island Cruise Control, where they get picked up by a cruise ship.
Nice. Now you're cooking with gas.
That's all you need. I mean, I don't need any. And that became the Love Boat.
Oh, dude.
How deep does it go?
My God. This thing goes all the way to the top.
It goes. I mean, is that the last chapter in Chaos, the Charles Manson book we started talking about 3 hours ago?
20 years. This is the next 20 years of our life, buddy. You better strap in. You and I are going to be seeing a lot of each other. This has been too much information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.
For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.